felt how warm it is today, and I heard some people say, oh, it's so nice. Thank you, global warming. But yes, so we all feel what the impact is currently. So I'm here today to share more about what's happening on a global level. So currently, the conversations like this one around circular economy has increased threefold in the last 7 years, which is great. More people are talking about it, more people are learning about it. Yet at the same time, our global economy is only 7.2% circular. You saw 8.6 in the video, so we're trending down. So that's the trends we don't like when things are going the wrong way. We're still not repurposing our material in a way that is fast enough. And when someone asks, how come we're becoming less circular, it's because we are growing as a population around the world, and we're still extracting more and more material from Earth. So on top of that, what Claudia also mentioned, in the last 100 years, we have consumed almost as much as we did in the last 5-6 years. So the trend downwards is circularity, and the trend upwards is very, very steep. And as also mentioned before, the more people we have, the more material we're extracting. Normally, that's a good thing. When there's more material extraction, you're building schools, you're building cities, it's a good sign. But we've come to a point in our existence as humans that taking more material is a detriment to our own health and our own future, and driving into a wall, like Claudia said, at full speed. And yet we're all sitting here feeling like we're safe, but we're not. So one of the reports that came out earlier this year is the Global Outlook from the UN, and that's also about bending the curve. So how do we, all of us, still have a good life with less material? And our numbers, our research has pointed out that we are able to all still have a very, very good life, very comfortable across the globe with 1/3 less material use. That's how much we're overproducing. If we look at the boundaries that we've already overshot, there's too many out of them. So we can reverse that overshoot if we just look at what's happened in the last 25 years. And we can reverse all of those overshoots with a circular economy. It's not fantasy, but it does take a lot of work, and it takes innovation. Innovation by all of you, by all of us, to innovate things that we are doing today in a different way. One of the things that so everyone pull out their phones because I'll have more QR codes. So this is a QR code to our report for the Global Economy 2024. It was launched earlier this year. The next report is coming out in May, might be a little earlier, but it will be in May. The first numbers are already known. I can't disclose, but it's not happy news. If we look at what we can do, we can repair, but often enough what's confused is that circular economy is recycling, and that there's a lot of focus right now on waste management, on plastics, but circular economy is so much more. And this is where innovation comes in to the theme of today. When we look at what we're doing in our processes, in the products that we create, in the way that we're resourcing, we have to look all the way upstream and see how we can source differently. Rather than mining for virgin material, how about urban mining? What about all the waste belts in our cities? There are very valuable sources. So trying to leverage waste management companies as resource companies, that's one of the things that we can change to really look at upstream resourcing. There's 3 things that we've identified as Circular Economy Foundation, what is needed to transition. One is to create a level playing field when it comes to policies. So some of you are here maybe by public transport or car, or even have flown in like myself. Yes, CO2 compensated. But what we do have to look at is how is our government working towards this transition? Are they actually supporting the subsidies in the right places? Right now in the Netherlands, where our organization is located, public transport is often enough more expensive than flying somewhere. For me to travel to Switzerland, it's 3 times as expensive than taking a flight because it's highly subsidized industry. So what's the level playing field when it comes to policy? The second one is to build circular expertise. Right now, all of us, the sitting workforce, we need to be re-skilled to be able to operate a circular economy. Now, which skills are needed and which jobs will change? That's also something we all need to be very much aware of. Not just our children and the next generations to come, but ourselves. Are we ready to operate a circular economy? Do you know enough about your job in a circular economy? The last one is getting the economics right. And hopefully this is also something that WBCSD will touch on more today, when it is about how do we all ensure that we speak the same language and use the same indicators. Right now, if we look at banks and the investments that startups or even scale-ups need when it comes to circular business models, they're going bankrupt because the banks don't know how to value an initiative like that. So one of the things that's needed is a set of indicators that we can all use so that investments are actually going where it's needed. There are trillions of dollars around the world, and this is not a lie, this is true, trillions. I don't have them in my pocket, but yes, there are many, many zeros available for this whole transition that are not released, they're not unleashed because we're not speaking the same language and we're not using the same indicators. And there's really important movement currently, hopefully also being available next year, to ensure that we're all talking the same language and that this money can be released so that we can actually transition. Now, when we look at our research and looking at an economy, we actually make an X-ray of all the materials that are used. And what you'll see is that we've grouped it into the 4 primary systems. So as you can imagine, buildings like this take a lot of material, but also our nutrition, mobility, and everything that we consume, everything that's manufactured, your glasses, your laptop, your iPads, your chairs, that's all consumables, what we use as humans. So looking at these 4 systems, this is where the biggest impact can be made. Now, not every country or every city has the same economic makeup. So we do have to look at what that flow looks like. So we've actually looked at what are the planetary boundary overshoots and how does that relate to the different types of nations, whether you're a grow, build, or shift nation. You will need different solutions. So if you look at the solutions that we've identified, you might have to zoom in, the font's a little bit small, but they're all in the report that you scanned. We have to look at which solutions are fit for purpose and then help cities and help countries transition. But more importantly, it's about businesses. In the end, if there is a policy, it is the business that would actually need to make the change on the ground in their supply chain, in their production processes. It's not all fable. This is actually happening on the ground. This is an example of a city in Germany where it's actually been repurposed and there's now housing being built, or it's actually been built a while ago. But this is also where looking at cities and how we're using the different areas and how we can repurpose different areas, how we can repurpose material. Another example, and this is a really interesting one, in Vietnam, where they created closed-loop industrial parks, meaning one company might have output, might have waste, which is relevant for another company's as an input. So if you create spaces in a city or industrial areas where companies can feed on each other, you're creating a closed loop, and that helps because you're not creating waste with company A and company B doesn't need to go for virgin materials. So creating that in our spaces is another very, very interesting solution to look at. Lastly, the built environment is one of the biggest footprints, looking at different types of material. Now, we're not used to wooden buildings in the Netherlands, and now for the first time there are wooden houses being built and also wooden apartment building, and that is far more sustainable when it comes to comparing that to concrete, unless you're using bio-based concrete, which is quite rare and quite expensive at the moment. But then again, you also need to change the skills that some of these building professionals have. They need to understand how to work with a different type of material. This is a case study, so this is another QR code that you can link. It's called the Knowledge Hub, and it hosts over 5,000 case studies from around the world. And we collect them, we don't write them, we have other people that are actually submitting them to our database. And that just informs you of examples around the world, but also of others who've gone before you in different industries, in different regions. If I look at, oh, there's a slide that was skipped. But Austria has also done their Circularity Gap report. I had a little slide with some text, but this is the report itself. And that actually was our first Circularity Gap report. So with this, the nation then had the ability, based on data-driven analysis, to pinpoint their actions. We did the same for Scotland. Scotland also had their Circularity Gap report. If you're interested in Scotland, we also distribute the QR codes after, but a little closer to home, the Balearic Islands. So they also looked at what does tourism do for the islands and how can we become more circular. If you're interested, again, this is another report. So not just nations and cities, but a lot of businesses have gone before you to also transition their business model. And I'm very pleased that Sonai is able to give this to you and share all this information to inspire you also to move towards a circular future. Very key to the transition is a systemic approach where industry leaders, but also policymakers and financial institutions need to collaborate to ensure that you're moving together towards a circular roadmap. Without this collaboration, things will happen in silo, and even though they might be the right things, it will definitely slow all of us down. So all of the research that we continue to do are published on our website. The next one coming tomorrow is Circularity Gap Report for Textiles. It's the first global value chain that's ever been analyzed at this level. The report will be available tomorrow and should also inform a nation like Portugal, where there's a lot of textile. There's a lot of opportunities, but it's looking quite grim. I mean, the bottom line would actually be, let's buy less. Or refurbish, like our host said today. Circularity Gap Report Finance, another very important report coming out next year, where we're identifying where the money isn't going yet and where it needs to be pointed from the development banks, but also from commercial banks. Now, just a couple of things before I close off, what you can do as a consumer, as a professional yourself. You can refuse. That's a very easy one. Say no to things. You can also look at rethink. How do you process your products right now? How do you source your materials? And also really important in textiles, but in every single industry. And the last one is to remember that we are the economy. It's not outside you. It's not the bank or the government or your employer that needs to fix this. The money that you earn and the money that you spend makes up the economy. And making sure that you also think about how you can repurpose that and make different choices. If we look at circular economy ourselves, we're moving into new regions to not just focus on Europe, but also going abroad to the Middle East and also to Asia after we did South America last year. So stay tuned if your value chain also touches on those regions. This is me after 25 years. As the host said, of startups and scale-ups, I lost my heart to circular economy, joined Circular Economy in 2020, and am working towards transitioning a lot of the businesses and also the nations that we touch on. What touched me was a movie, and I'll just show you a little preview of that.
We have this misunderstanding of what Darwin really meant when he said survival of the fittest.
The whole Earth is actually one cohesive system, and we are screwing up the balance.
This is going to change the world.
It's this incredible juggling act of the same materials over and over and over.
Life always put me where there were interesting questions to answer.
What in the natural world has already solved what it is I'm trying to solve?
The current system is linear. Circularity, you're trying to keep everything in the loop. There's no waste.
I began questioning how the economy operates.
This is a turning point that's more profound than you realize.
Circularity is the only hope. This is the only way we can survive.
Looking at nature is true inspiration. So for all of you, please enjoy this film, which is not publicly available. So there's an exclusive screening for you to enjoy with your friends, your family, your co-workers. Don't forget the password, Innovators Forum 24. It's a beautiful film. It's a feature film, an hour and a half. Please enjoy, and I hope this inspires you to make circular choices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. You will stand here with me now because it's our time for questions and answers. Tenho uma ótima notícia, de facto nós recebemos imensas questões, mas por uma questão de tempo vamos ter que selecionar só 2 ou 3. We received a lot of questions when you were speaking, yes. I select 3 or 4 questions, depending on our time. We have 10 minutes from our platform. So, the first question is, based on findings, the latest global circularity gap report, what are the most urgent actions we must take globally to close this gap? And are there specific industries or regions where we should focus our efforts first for the greatest impact?
Okay, very good. So as I mentioned, the built environment has the biggest impact when it comes to material usage. But that is what we call stock. So you extract materials from the earth and you build buildings, and that's in stock. And there's a couple of things that we can certainly do. It's looking at different types of material, but in the end, we will have to continue to build schools, housing, especially in developing and growing nations. Now, where we can focus our efforts is manufacturing. So anything to do with consumables. If we look at our food and agri system and our consumables, anything like electronics, clothing, mobility, that's a high impact. If we look at the region right now, there's been a lot of focus on circularity, obviously in Europe with all of our legislation, but that trickles down to the global value chains also in the manufacturing nations. And we must focus on the manufacturing nations and the mining nations across Asia and Africa to ensure that there's a just transition, that we don't leave anyone behind, and that we look at jobs and skills in those areas.
Okay, thank you so much. E obrigada a quem colocou esta questão. So the second one is, transitioning to a circular economy requires systematic change. What role do you see for leadership at different levels, government, business, and social society, civil society, in driving this transformation, and how can they overcome resistance to the change? This is a...
If I had a magic wand, then we could solve all problems, world peace. In the end, it comes down to individuals. If you lead a company, or if you are in a senior position, the choices you make in this time are going to make a huge difference. One example comes to mind. It's a US-based company that make carpets. And they actually, 25 years ago, they started on their sustainability journey because the founder and CEO of Interface had a vision. And because of that vision, he went back to his team and he said, we will become a sustainable company. You tell me how and you tell me when. But he had a vision, and I think that's something that's admirable. And the other one are the stick, right? Whether it's your materials will become obsolete at some point. The economics will change and it'll hurt your business model. So also looking at the CFO's role and looking more long-term rather than just the next financial quarter is going to make a huge difference.
Thank you so much. We still have 4 minutes, so I can go to the third question. So, achieving circularity involves significant shifts in metrics and KPIs. What are the most critical indicators to measure progress effectively, and how can they be standardized across industries and countries?
So you're mostly familiar with ISO standards. So this year also an ISO standard for circularity was published. We're also, of course, looking at CSRD across Europe that also has circularity in it. Another circularity indicator that's coming out next year, which the Business Council hopefully will touch on in more detail, is the Global Circularity Protocol that's currently in development, and it can be compared to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which was developed over 20 years ago. Now that protocol will help businesses to speak one language and report similarly. With that metric, with the Global Circularity Protocol, we can advance and accelerate the transition by 11 years. 11, yes. That's an impact analysis that has recently been done this year, but that's how much of a difference it would make if we all speak the same language.
So, oh great. We still have time for our fourth question. The vision for a circular future, this question, if we were to achieve a truly circular economy, what would our world look like in 2050? We're talking about that.
2050.
No, 2050. And how can we ensure this vision is not only economically viable, but also equitable and inclusive for all, for everyone?
I was just thinking how old I would be. I would be 75, and how would I like to look at the world? But we will never be 100% circular, period. Right? That's just not going to happen. And also, as Circular Economy Foundation, we're not working towards 100% circularity, just 17%. If we were at 17% by 2032, we would stay within the planetary boundaries. That's not impossible. What a world would look like if we become truly circular, I think it would be the modern version of our world 300 years ago, where we're much more in tune with nature, where we care for our environment, where we're not just seeking profit, because in the end, profit means someone else is paying for it. So it has to be a viable business, but it has to be in balance, and that's what I like with Arthur Wong in the film. He also says, we are screwing up the balance, literally. So by then, when I'm 75 and looking at blue skies, unpolluted waterways, I'm hoping for all of us and for our future generations that it will be a nature-balanced future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yvonne.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It was very nice having you here. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You can go to take your place now. Depois destas palavras tão inspiradoras que a Yvonne nos deixou, vamos passar ao nosso primeiro painel. We now begin the first panel of this afternoon, where we will explore concrete strategies for building a circular and regenerative economy at various levels. And no better to inspire us in shaping this future than those who have played and continue to play an active role in driving this change. So let's give a warm welcome to Bernd Heiling, Head of Policy and Outreach at Reimagine Europe, an initiative committed to promoting cooperation and innovation among industries and policymakers, driving sustainable change and fostering a forward-looking vision for Europe's future. Bernd. Raphael Masvigner, co-founder of Circular, a company that has support over 120 business and regions in accelerating their transition to a circular economy, guiding them through every stage of their transformation. And moderating this talk, we are delighted to have Marta Brazão, President of Circular Economy Portugal, an organization dedicated to promoting the concept of circular economy with a special focus on implementing projects to encourage sharing, repairing, and reusing. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is yours. Obrigada, até já.
Hello everyone, good afternoon, boa tarde a todos. Hello Rafael, hello Bernd, nice to have you here. So my name is Marta and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm the president of this NGO called Circular Economy in Portugal and I will be the moderator for this panel. Just to give you a brief note, this panel was supposed to be composed by 3 speakers. Unfortunately, Ken Webster cannot come and join us because he has COVID. So unfortunately, this happened, but we still have 2 amazing speakers, and we will give answer to this question and to this panel. Before we start, I just wanted to maybe just give a little bit of an introduction. We already had Yvonne with this overview of the world and about circularity, so just a little bit of an introduction and also maybe a provocation, if I might, to this panel. So, as we heard before, the world is only 7.2 circular. And I was thinking, what does this mean? When I was preparing this, I knew about the number already, and I thought, what does this mean? This means that our economy, which is a social science, actually, that studies scarcity, or that studies how we use resources, or it is the study of production, distribution, and consumption of wealth, should have the ultimate goal of helping society to make better choices. That's what I think it should be. Fairly as possible. So this would be my interpretation of economics. But from the beginning of this concept, which should be how we manage the household, right? At least this was Economics 101 that I have in the university. From what we have nowadays, I believe that we got lost along the way. So how come in this economic model, supposedly so rational, so full of data and information, we take, make, and waste so much? How come we use the resources of the planet as if they were infinite? And acknowledging, with no doubt, at least for me, that something is wrong with this system, the so-called negative externalities, what new type of economy can we implement that creates positive impact, not only for the economy, but also for people and the planet, of course. So this is the small question that we're going to try to get answered here. So with me, I have Bernd and Rafael with very different approaches, but and very complementary ways of thinking about the problem. So Bernd, because of your experience in a more, let's call meso approach, I would like to ask you that, given your experience before and now with Reimagined Europa, do you think that the European legislation helps design better policies, and can we design better policies at a national or local level that promote more circular economies? And if you want to get in touch also what Reimagined Europa does also, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question, and thanks very much for the invitation. Very glad to be here and talk about... there's already a feedback. So I work for Reimagined Europa. We're a think tank in Brussels, and we work with narratives. And this means we try to understand how do people construct stories and how do they see and understand them from their own value base. And we all know that climate change for some people is really important, and they really think they have all the solutions. We have the moral duty to go ahead and do it. But other people are more skeptical. Particularly in the last years, we have seen in Brussels a growing skepticism driven by populists, but also driven by some left-wing skeptics. And that's what we do. We now have made a big study on narratives on climate change. Circular economy is part of it, to understand better what's the dynamic behind it and why do people change. And it's something we're talking a bit later on. But if we talk about what solutions we have, we also should talk about how do we tell the story. And how do we ensure we not just talk to people who already are convinced, but also people that are skeptic? Because we cannot afford just to talk to 5% of the people, and 20% are not interested, and 50% are really skeptical because they see it as some strange plot from the green movement to stop them having their real lives. That's, I think, something to keep in mind when we talk about circular. The other two things I want to say is, before I talk about legislation, which is a fascinating topic, everyone loves to talk about legislation, is we also should take into account, as we also heard in some of the previous speeches, the importance of new technologies. And I think with artificial intelligence and with biotechnology, something I know a little bit more about, we have an opportunity to look into things differently. But again, we have to tell the stories right, and we also have to get the right people together to focus on what's in the public interest, not only what's the interest of the state or certain companies, but what actually is something we can do with it. Now, on the European level, we have a number of activities, as you know, from the European Commission, supported by the previous Parliament on the big Green New Deal. And a big chunk of this was the circular economy, with lots of programs and legislation ongoing. I can say that the big paper came out, I don't know if you have read it or looked at it, in 2020. And after 5 years, we can say some things were done. There was some ambition there, not everything is really put into practice, but okay, these things take time. But in one of the reports that came back out of the Court of Auditors of the European Commission, they said, well, the problem is it doesn't seem to go down to member states. Member states take very little up of these ideas in legislation and make it work. And this also means local and regional authorities will not really address these issues. So one of the topics to discuss is how can we get from nice, general, well-meaning European legislation, something practically on the ground we can work with. The other problem is, or challenge, I think maybe the problem is that we have now, with the change of the parliament, a much more center-right populist parliament, and also the Commission feels that. If you look at the new Commission, you will have, to the glee of many NGOs, a new commissioner for the circular economy, which is one of the main topics. The question is, how strong will she be, and how well will she work together with Teresa Ribeira, who will be the General Change Commissioner. And you have some people already in the parliament and said, well, let's see how far we go on this, because we want to see what you do of competitiveness and what you do for innovation. So we have to see how the new commission plays out in your parliament, and this will also have an impact on and how we do legislation will do. If I can make a last point, in looking at narratives, sometimes some things we call narrative traps, some ideas we have in our minds which are not true, but go well down with our different groups. And one, for example, is there's a fundamental polarization between sustainability and innovation. So for some people, they say technology cannot really help us, it's just old classical green ways. And other people say, well, it needs to be innovation, it's just some green thinking and dreaming. And this polarization is false. What we have to try to work with on the European level, national, but also our stakeholders, is to get beyond this black-white thinking and see what's the middle way. How can we tell this story, this narrative, differently?
Thank you. Rafael, I would ask you, because you come from a consulting company, can I call it like that, Circular? And actually France is really a front runner, at least in my opinion, about circular policies and sustainability at the legislation level. But in the ground with your company, what are you doing to help companies transition and creating this better economy? And if you want also to touch maybe the positive aspects, but also the obstacles that you see working with these companies.
Ok. Bom dia a todos. Vou continuar em inglês. So, as you were saying, since the last 10 years with Circular, we've been helping big companies, especially in France, transitioning from linear business model, take, make, dispose, to circular economy business models. The first learning I would like to share with you after a 10-year experience in this field is that if you want to convince big companies or ex-com members, such as Claudia from Sonai, you have to go beyond sustainability. If you just talk about circular economy to explore the field of sustainability, to tackle planet boundaries, it's key, but you need to talk about business. You need to talk about the cost of inaction. Otherwise, like big companies are not going to listen to you. Because once again, their key priority is to build their business and to make the business stronger. So what we realize is that if you convince big companies, you have to talk about the cost of inaction, and you have to explain how circular economy can first help you mitigate risks, because there are going to be lots of shock of natural resources because of scarcity of natural resources. We're gonna have shortage of natural raw materials, and that's going to be a problem for big companies. Circular economy is a key tool to mitigate risk. And the other way you can see circular economy is a way to build a circular and resilient business on the long term. So that's the two learnings. Go out of the way of just sustainability, but talk about business and circular economy as well. Now, if we focus on France and big companies, either it's in France or in Europe, just to have it in mind, how many people here in the room are representing companies? Can you raise your hand, please? Okay, so basically, when you're within a company, you have three main phases where you can play with the circular economy. The first one is the production phase, and at this stage, you can work on sustainable supply. It's basically how you're going to switch from virgin material to basically secondary raw materials or renewable materials. So these are going to be the procurement team working on that, the supply chain team, that's key. And then there is the design part. How are you going to design a product so that at the end of the life, it doesn't become a waste and it can enter in the different loops that Ivan was presenting us. So that's the first step. And this step is key because at this stage, the production phase, you can reduce up to 80% of the impact of a product. The second phase is the usage phase. Once the product is on the market, you're going to use it, there's going to be impact. As Yvonne was saying just before, the first thing is frugality. We don't need to produce what we don't need, you know? But then you have to move from linear business model to circular economy business model, such as service economy or sharing economy. Instead of selling a product, you sell the usage of the product. And here it's key also to move from an extractivist point of doing business to a linear point of doing business. And there, once again, there are some companies such as Decathlon, and I will go back to that, that are developing a circular economy business model. And just to give you key figures, Decathlon, they have a target on circular economy business models. It has to be representing 15% of the turnover by 2026. So it's tomorrow, and it's happening. And then the last phase is basically giving a new life, or end of the life. And here you work with the logistic team or with your providers and your partners. And basically it's first how you sort and collect well, and then basically how you put in place a loop. And one of the key learning, recycling is part of the economy. But please, 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 always favor the shortest loop. Reuse, repair, refurbish. And if you cannot do that, recycle. Why? Because if you look at recycling, it's one of the biggest loops in circular economy. What does it mean? When you're recycling, you are emitting a lot of CO2 emission, you're using a lot of water, you're using a lot of energy. When you're doing repair, refurbishment, that's not the case. So in a sustainable point of view, it's a way better to move to a smaller loop than bigger loop. So that are the three phases where you can play to activate circular economy, and that are the key learnings we had so far.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, we also talked about this when we had our session amongst ourselves, that I also made a provocation about this innovation aspect that nowadays is very in vogue, and usually companies also ask for this, right? So circular economy, but needs to be innovative. And my provocation, and we can restart that conversation again, is for me sometimes, and I don't know if you had this feeling, that circular economy sometimes feels like we're going back in some type of economy or usage or habits. And even though no one wants to go to be the caveman again, it's not it. Sometimes we're not innovating in the sense that we're not creating like the wheel again, right? So for you, Rafael, I would ask, how do you sell this idea of circular economy, being innovative, yes, but really going back to a different system that we have right now, right? Because we are asking for companies to change the business model. Or at least that's what we want. And for you, Bernd, the question of this, the innovation, but also with the social aspect of this, because you talk a lot about the polarization that is happening right now. So do we have a narrative for the future, a common? Is it needed? And maybe circular economy can be one of these narratives for this social development and for this innovation case. So whoever wants to start.
Okay. I will go back to your previous question that I didn't answer at the level of circular economy. That's important because I would say that I don't have to sell circular economy to big companies any longer. Why? Because they are, no, that's not true. Obviously, I have to convince them, but there's three levers that are pushing big companies to do circular economy. The first one is what you were talking about just before. It's like fit with existing regulation. CSRD, critical raw material like ESPR, these are all regulations that are going to impact big companies now. So they need to do it, otherwise they will pay tax penalties. Then business, once again, there is a cost of inaction when you are not moving to a circular economy. So now you have a turnover at risk if you're staying on the linear economic model. So like instead of losing 20 million in the 5 coming years, you just have to invest 5 million to mitigate risk and implement circular economy business model. So business-wise, it's interesting for companies, and that's why they invest in it. Third point, consumers. Consumers are more and more demanding on like transparency and the impact of the product. Once again, it's pushing companies, especially B2C companies. And I don't know if you heard about this application, Yuka. It's basically an app where you can scan the product and you see the impact of the product. Intermarché, which is basically a big retailing company, a big supermarket, maybe Sonai know them, they had to withdraw 400 of their references because they had a bad score. So transparency and consumer is pushing. And then like retaining talents, obviously a company, for instance Sonai is no more than key people, such as Claudia and other people. If you don't like take strong commitments on circular economy, you're not going to retain the talents. A company such as Total in France is struggling to get new talents. So that was just to say that I no longer have to struggle to sell circular economy. I have to convince them and so on. But, and about collaboration, collaboration has been changing in the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years. Like 10 years ago, big companies were basically partnering with startups. That was easy for them because they were not taking too much risk. They were not transforming their core business model. They were not transforming their supply chain. It was helping them to do pilot projects, explore circular economy, and maybe find new way of doing businesses. But now, once again, because of shortage, because of legislation, companies have to move a step further. So there's still this collaboration between startup and big companies for innovation, and it's great because startups are super agile and help companies innovating. In Circular, we have created a club where basically CEO of startups meets the CEO of CAC40, so that's key. But what we see, the move that's happening is that big companies are now no longer just collaborating with startups, but with also collaborating with other big companies. Even there is collaboration, but also co-opetition, meaning that even competitors are willing to cooperate. And just to give you one last example, concrete example, we just launched with Circular a coalition in the cosmetic industry. Basically, we have a law where cosmetic industry leaders need to re-employ the packaging, reuse the packaging. They're not respecting the law. And within this coalition, we have Estée Lauder, we have Dior, we have Clarins, we have L'Oréal. They're all competitors. But to mitigate risk, to share the cost, they need to collaborate and they need to innovate together. So to end up on innovation, I think collaboration between startups and big companies is key, but now we're moving more and more toward big companies with big companies and even competitors together.
Gordon?
Yeah, maybe just 3 points I would like to take out. The first is, I was astonished. I worked for a big company in the area of biotech, so biotech is close to my heart. I asked the scientists always when they did some new on plant biotech or health biotech, so beyond the technical aspect, what's the impact on society? They said, we don't know. It's not our business. Some other people will know, but somehow never really looked at it. And this is one fascinating thing, that if you look how innovation can change things, it's beyond just discussing how railway works or how do you transport people, but what's the impact on society. And many social structures, like the public company or like the patent, are not scientific inventions. They're social inventions and have a huge impact on how the economy works. So my plea is, particularly in this new digital, hopefully also bioeconomy age, to think about, are our old structures still worth keeping and how do we change them? But also, what is the impact going to be beyond nice brochures from scientists or companies, or catastrophic tales from some civil society groups that everything is horrible, but no. Let's look at it, see it out, and see what really changes. I would like to answer your second part, to look a little bit on something that's called the European bioeconomy. There is a consortium in Brussels, 2 billion euros, companies and money from the European Commission, that tries to get a new cycle going on biomass, using biotech, which is very quick-moving science, as a basis. And this has been actually very successful. And it's a bit different from the classical discussions on circular, because it is not using existing materials in the same way, but take, for example, CO2 not from fossil fuels, so replace, but from nature, or from the air. Get CO2, suck it out of the air, and start to use it to making materials out of it. And that's a very interesting, very different approach. And there are many interesting examples, and I won't want to go too deep into it, how you can make differences. But for example, I learned that a young scientist in Denmark created a new way how to put asphalt together, not with bitumen from oil, but actually by mushrooms. And it works very well, and it's a huge volume they can use. So it shows how little scientific change can make a dramatic impact on the way how this works. If we would go systematically through it and try to work this as a society, not just as a project here and there, this would make a big difference. That's my final plea, maybe, not to the public, but to politicians, but also to the entrepreneurs. Let's put this down systematically and not just go and do our parallel ways. This will make a huge difference to go forward.
Agree. And because of time, I will ask you, is there the time? I will ask you just to briefly, so imagining the world that we can design this better economy, how do you personally or your organization, how do you feel or how do you want to fit in this creation of this new positive economy? Can you imagine?
at least I will share a conviction. At Circular, we're convinced of one thing. What happened in the 70s with the technical and numeric revolution, technological revolution, is exactly what's happening with circular economy right now. Back in the 70s, companies such as Microsoft, Apple, seized the opportunity of the technological revolutions. Other companies, such as Kodak, disappeared. IBM, they struggled to get back on the business. It's exactly the same on circular economy. Like companies that are not seizing the opportunity right now will lag behind, and the companies that will involve themselves fully into circular economy will be the future leader of tomorrow. That's really happening. And just to give you two concrete examples, because I'm talking, but I'd like to talk about metrics as well. Once again, Decathlon in 2023, just out of their circular business models, they managed to create a turnover of 500 million euros. We're talking about hundreds of million euros. Renault, that are doing cars, they have a target of 2.3 billion euros in terms of turnover by 2030. We're no longer talking about just experimenting circular economy, just bringing it to a next level. And the conviction is the right time is now. And if you don't seize the opportunity, that's going to be a problem.
I try to stay with 1 minute, so
no,
keep in time.
That's okay. No, please.
It's a challenge. So I just would say 3 areas. The first is I would love to see in 20 years' time that people don't talk polarized way about here is nature and there's innovation, but there's a common approach to say we have to go forward, what works, what's pragmatic, if it's in the interest of society. This would be my first vision to say, reimagine, that's what we do every day. The second point I think is that companies are going ahead and scientists to research, to innovate, to move ahead in a very light framework of legislation, not as heavy as we have now. I think will help artificial intelligence, but that we get away from this idea that governments have to produce legislation, be meaningful. I think particularly for the Commission that's a very bad thing to do. And I personally think that with this new technology we have a chance to really build a circular economy, maybe even getting many of our biomass, again, out the air, to shrink the CO2 back where it should be. This, I think, would be the holy grail. How quick we go there, we'll see, but I think the technology and the science gives options we might get there soon enough.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Thank you very much, Bernd. Thank you all for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's it for us. If you want, we'll be around to talk and explore more this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Thank you all for such an inspiring panel. It's an absolute privilege to share the stage with people who are making a real difference in our world. And as we heard a few minutes ago, the time is now. O nosso próximo painel, Sonai Learning Nuggets, explora os desafios e as oportunidades dos negócios na implementação das práticas da economia circular com casos bem reais. No palco, convosco, e passo agora a chamar para moderar esta conversa, Sónia Cardoso, diretora de sustentabilidade da Sonai. Bem-vinda, Sónia. Bem-vinda, Sónia. Ana Vilaça, especialista em sustentabilidade na empresa Sonai MC. Mafalda Paz, especialista em sustentabilidade na empresa Salsa Jeans. E Bruno Borges, CEO da iServices e que hoje está aqui também a representar a Vorten. Meus senhores, o palco é vosso. Muito obrigada.
Boa tarde a todos. Como saberão, a iServices repara smartphones, não só, mas também e sobretudo smartphones. Começámos há 13 anos. É verdade que em 2011 a circularidade não era o principal tema do momento e agora, passados estes anos, é um tema da atualidade e é por isso que estamos aqui. Contamos com cerca de 90 lojas espalhadas por 4 países, nomeadamente Portugal, a nossa origem, Espanha, França e Bélgica. São cerca de 420 técnicos que nos permitem, ano após ano, crescer e temos continuamente crescido, mesmo durante o período de Covid. E são estes 420 técnicos que nos permitem chegar a estas 42.500 intervenções técnicas por mês efetuadas em equipamentos eletrónicos. Queria-vos explicar aqui um pouco e mostrar o ciclo de vida de um equipamento. Nós temos a nossa estratégia muito alicerçada em 4 R's. A reparação, o recondicionamento, a reutilização e a retoma. Agimos sobretudo após a venda do equipamento. Sabemos que há a necessidade da extração de matérias-primas, a necessidade dos materiais para a produção do equipamento, o seu fornecimento, produção e venda, mas a função da iServices é esta, é tentar prolongar ao máximo o ciclo de vida de cada equipamento. E por essa razão reparamos diariamente smartphones que necessitam de uma nova bateria ou por terem caído ao chão partiram um vidro ou que tiveram um dano de água. E, portanto, não é por essa razão que necessitam de ser descartados. Eles podem ser intervencionados, devem ser intervencionados e fazemos-lo de forma muito rápida, em 20 a 30 minutos. Recondicionamos cerca de 10 mil smartphones por mês. São smartphones que já tiveram uma primeira vida, já tiveram um primeiro utilizador e que nós temos o cuidado de testar, trocar alguma peça se necessário, higienizar e voltar a vender com a mesma garantia de um equipamento novo. As vendas que fazemos dos nossos recondicionados são de 3 anos de garantia em qualquer parte da Europa, nos países onde operamos. Reutilizamos praticamente 100% das peças que extraímos dos smartphones. As baterias são recondicionadas e terão uma nova utilidade, um novo uso. E os vidros que retiramos dos smartphones dispomos de laboratórios próprios que nos permitem recondicionar e, numa fase posterior, vender e colocar novamente em uso no mercado. E, por último, permitimos a retoma de todos os equipamentos que os nossos clientes tenham em sua posse. Portanto, na compra de um recondicionado, todos os clientes têm a possibilidade de nos vender o seu equipamento anterior e nós teremos o cuidado de lhe encontrar um novo dono e uma nova vida. Muito rapidamente, queria-vos dar aqui um overview daquilo que é esta área de negócio. É uma área de negócio que tem vindo a crescer ao longo dos últimos anos, de forma contínua. Segundo a OCDE, tem uma perspectiva na área da reparação de crescer 5,1% ao ano. E para que isto aconteça, é muito importante que os fabricantes tenham alguns cuidados associados. O primeiro dos cuidados é produzir material que tenha durabilidade, produzir material que não tenha uma obsolescência programada. E, portanto, a durabilidade dos materiais é um ponto fulcral. Também terem o cuidado de disponibilizar peças. Essas peças têm que ser disponibilizadas e de forma transversal, não só para empresas como a iServices, mas inclusive para o cliente final que queira proceder à sua reparação em sua casa, se for necessário. E, por último, terem o cuidado do índice de reparabilidade. Os materiais e os produtos, quando são desenhados, devem ser desenhados com vista à sua reparação futura. E, portanto, esta é a nossa preocupação, é que no futuro os fabricantes tenham também este cuidado. Em relação aos recondicionados, os recondicionados têm um forte crescimento, superior ainda às reparações, neste momento, embora com um valor de mercado inferior, tem previsto uma evolução de 12,5% ao ano. E, curiosamente, o último inquérito que fizemos em Portugal, 19,1% dos inquiridos já tinha adquirido um ou mais equipamentos recondicionados, não só smartphones, mas equipamentos eletrónicos recondicionados para a sua casa. Somos um dos países que tem, a este nível, um bom índice, daí também a razão para algumas das empresas que vendem recondicionados terem um elevado desempenho aqui em Portugal. Por último, não queria ir embora sem apresentar aquilo que foi o nosso contributo em 2024 para esta área da circularidade. Nós intervencionámos até dia 31 de outubro 426 mil equipamentos, E estes 426 mil equipamentos permitiram poupar o equivalente a 25 toneladas de CO2 que, dessa forma, não foram libertados para a atmosfera, e o correspondente também a cerca de 2.000 piscinas olímpicas de água. Para termos noção, cada equipamento na sua produção, na sua cadeia de produção, consome o equivalente a 12.000 litros de água. Em suma, evitámos que 85 toneladas de lixo eletrónico fossem parar ao meio ambiente. Obrigado. Vou passar... Obrigado. Passo a palavra à Mafalda.
Obrigada. Vamos ver se... Espera que vão pôr os slides. Bem, boa tarde a todos. Vamos esperar aqui que apareça. Ok, perfeito. Bem, hoje venho-vos apresentar o grande projeto de circularidade da Salsa Jeans. Antes disso, queria-vos falar, não sei se vocês nos conhecem, mas nós temos um programa BICAM, nosso programa de sustentabilidade com base em 3 pilares, planeta, produto e pessoas, sendo que o planeta tem por base os recursos naturais, a eficiência e a otimização, como a água e a energia. Depois temos o produto, com o grande foco em projetos de circularidade e de ecodesign, como por exemplo o nosso Infinity, e também a nossa aplicação de edições limitadas de aprendizagem e depois aplicação no futuro no produto. E por fim, pessoas, onde nos focamos na nossa cadeia de abastecimento, na nossa cadeia de valor, tanto a nível de rastreabilidade como a nível de todo o produto, de como é produzido. E, por fim, a nível dos nossos colaboradores, sempre com grande importância na formação, equidade e diversidade. E agora sim, aquilo que nos trouxe hoje. Como é que surgiu então o Infinity? Nós pensamos, ok, o que é que nós podemos fazer a nível de circularidade? Podemos dar uma vida mais responsável ao nosso produto. Então, começamos a elaborar o nosso projeto e apercebemos que podíamos fazer ainda mais, podíamos prolongar o nosso produto. E assim seguiu o nosso lema, dá uma vida infinita aos teus jeans. Trouxe-vos aqui um diagrama muito simples, para vocês compreenderem como funciona então o nosso projeto. Tudo começa na nossa loja física Salsa Jeans. Portugal, Espanha, França, Irlanda e Luxemburgo. O cliente pega no seu jeans, por exemplo, leva a uma loja e o colaborador da loja irá avaliar se essa peça é reparável ou não. Caso seja reparável, irá seguir o fluxo de cima, em que esse artigo segue para o nosso ateliê na Salsa em Famalicão, não sei se vocês conhecem, e os nossos confeccionadores fazem então essa reparação, garantindo sempre a qualidade e mestria. Depois, esses artigos são novamente entregues ao cliente na loja e poderão ser usados muito mais vezes. No caso do cliente não querer reparar ou então o próprio artigo não está apto para ser reparado, então segue o caminho da recolha. O caminho da recolha, esse artigo chega à logística e há a seguir 3 fluxos. O fluxo da doação, caso o artigo esteja em boas condições, ou então os 2 fluxos de baixo, que em caso o artigo já não esteja apto, podem então seguir o upcycling, por exemplo, a transformação do jeans num tote bag, ou até já vimos em casos de transformação numa saia, ou então o nosso fluxo da reciclagem, transformação em fio reciclado. Estes 3 fluxos têm o mesmo fim, que é dar início a uma nova vida e a novos clientes. Bem, o Infinity já tem 2 anos de vida, iniciou em junho de 2022 e podemos ver que já foram reparadas mais de 4.000 peças. Isto é um grande indicador de sucesso do programa, pois podemos ver que há uma grande adesão ao serviço de reparação. Só neste último ano cresceu 58%. Para além disso, outro ponto interessante é que o cliente opta sem dúvida por reparações que são mais complexas e por isso mesmo mais caras, como por exemplo o aumento e a diminuição de um tamanho de jeans. E por fim, acho que o ponto mais surpreendente é que o cliente está disposto a pagar. Isto não é um serviço gratuito. E podemos ver que existem dois métodos de pagamento, em dinheiro e em estrelas. E podemos ver que o pagamento, sem dúvida, em euros é aquele que é o mais utilizado. Só para queria-vos dar aqui um destaque importante, que é todos estes artigos que são reparados no nosso ateliê. É pelas nossas confeccionadoras que trabalham connosco há muitos anos, mesmo aqueles que vêm, por exemplo, de Luxemburgo. É sempre por base na nossa casa. E por isso conseguimos sempre garantir que isto é feito com a maior qualidade dos nossos artigos. Então, pronto, finalizar, podemos ver que estes resultados nos dão, convencem-nos que o futuro pode ser melhor, porque temos realmente clientes que estão interessados neste tipo de serviço. Existe uma grande emoção relacionada com o nosso genes e, portanto, existe um grande interesse em tornar esse, digo, então, infinito. Pronto, obrigada a todos. Vou passar agora à Ana.
A estratégia da MC Move for Change, a estratégia de sustentabilidade, procura ser, de facto, um transformador dentro de toda a cadeia de abastecimento da MC e procurando promover iniciativas e boas práticas responsáveis e cada vez mais sustentáveis. E dentro desta estratégia transversal a toda a companhia, nós temos um eixo particular, um eixo estratégico que trabalhamos com muito carinho, que é a circularidade. E, de facto, este eixo de atuação, nós procuramos ter linhas de ação em como ter iniciativas para combate ao desperdício alimentar, otimizarmos sistemas de recolha e triagem de resíduos e também temos a criação de packaging cada vez mais reutilizável e também com uma dimensão de ecodesign que nos permita ter reciclabilidade, design for recycling e atingir a nossa meta de 2025 de 100% de reciclabilidade de todas as nossas embalagens na MC. Mas nós também investimos em modelos e em soluções mais sustentáveis e também circulares. E por isso, hoje falarei particularmente sobre esta agenda. Os reuse models. E em 2021, nós, na MC, estudamos bastante o tema da reutilização à escala global. Nós fizemos benchmark e tentamos perceber o que é que retalhistas, marcas, produtores estavam a fazer neste âmbito, nesta dimensão. E realmente percebemos que estava a haver muito dinamismo e que este movimento estava a crescer. E, aliás, isto foi uma altura pós-Covid e estudos consumidores também estavam-nos a dizer que eles estavam bastante preocupados com o que estava a acontecer à escala global relativamente ao problema dos resíduos e também preocupados, envolvidos e mais exigentes relativamente à reutilização. E por isso a nossa jornada de facto iniciou com esta grande convicção: Time for Reuse is now. E inspiramos então neste framework da Ellen MacArthur Foundation, que foca em 4 modelos de reuse models. E neste âmbito, nós percebemos que havia um eixo deste reuse model que ainda não tínhamos explorado no universo da MC, e era ele o refill on the go. E por isso, nós tínhamos convicções fortes e grandes motivações para fazermos um piloto e testarmos em ambiente de loja este eixo de atuação de reuse model. Isto porquê? Porque nós queremos aprender mais, queremos preparar-nos para o futuro, termos maior entendimento sobre este modelo. Queríamos também perceber a receptividade do consumidor e a sua atratividade para utilizar em ambiente de loja este modelo. Também queríamos aproximar-nos do nosso compromisso e que temos perante a Ellen MacArthur Foundation, no qual nós somos signatários, de que estamos a trabalhar também o eixo da circularidade. E também queríamos antecipar aquilo que estava a acontecer a nível de regulamentação para a reutilização, quer a nível europeu, quer a nível português. E por isso, implementamos um piloto Refill on Go, e que consiste neste equipamento módulo que podem ver no vosso lado direito, e em que o cliente podia fazer a dispensa de produto de uma forma self-service e automatizada. E, de facto, nós, recordando aquilo que eu disse há pouco, parecia que realmente os clientes estavam bastante motivados e mesmo no lançamento nós tivemos aqui reações muito positivas, nomeadamente nas redes sociais e no LinkedIn. Mas depois tivemos alguma resistência ao nível de resultados. que é que nós apercebemos? Que apenas 20% dos clientes repetiram a compra de refill e apenas 6% das transações foram feitas com reutilização de embalagens. E nós tínhamos uma verdadeira narrativa do modelo circular que fechava por completo o ciclo. Esta narrativa baseava-se numa economia e num processo em que tínhamos embalagens reutilizáveis inteligentes, quer secundárias e quer primárias. E, no fundo, o que é que acontecia? A embalagem secundária tinha um processo permanente de encaminhamento para que saía do produtor, seria encaminhado para as lojas e depois para o nosso centro de serviços. E era nesse centro de serviços que depois fazia o caminho inverso e eram depois higienizadas e depois completava-se o ciclo regressando novamente ao produtor para ele fazer o enchimento com mais produto. Mas em todo o projeto piloto nós tivemos desafios bastante exigentes e complexos. Primeiro de tudo, tivemos que definir novos procedimentos comerciais, logísticos, operacionais, financeiros, como se tratasse de um novo modelo de negócio. E só aqui à parte, só implementamos o projeto em 2 lojas continente. Além disso, nós tivemos aqui grandes desafios, mas que, graças à grande colaboração que tivemos dos parceiros que trabalharam connosco, nós conseguimos superar. E só aqui para vocês terem uma ideia, que desafios é que estou aqui a falar. Por exemplo, atualmente todas as linhas de produção e de abastecimento dos nossos fornecedores são totalmente automatizadas e não estão preparadas para fazer o enchimento de cápsulas deste género com produto. Também era necessário evitar a contaminação cruzada de cápsulas em que tinham produtos com glúten e produtos sem glúten. E isso foi feito através de um processo bastante manual. Também para vos dar a nota que tivemos desafios a nível de higienização das cápsulas no nosso centro de serviços e houve bastante criatividade para levarmos a bom porto esse tema. E também, por último, queria-vos também dar a nota relativamente à gama de produtos que nós tínhamos no nosso projeto piloto. Nós não conseguimos diversificar tanto como nós gostaríamos. E porquê? Porque atualmente existem restrições regulatórias relativamente à venda a granel de alguns produtos. E dou como exemplo o arroz. E segundo, porque também havia constrangimentos a nível de dispensa do produto, visto por causa de algum tipo de formato ou de tamanho ou de consistência. E recuperando, voltando aqui àquilo que eu questionei há 3 anos, será que estamos mesmo na altura do reuse? É mesmo agora? E como é que a CMC pode acelerar a sua agenda de circularidade? E o que nós fizemos foi ouvir os clientes, porque os clientes têm sempre razão, ou então não. E por isso, 3 grandes insights que eu queria partilhar convosco. O primeiro deles, os clientes valorizam a existência da gama de produtos orientados para a circularidade. E estamos a falar de produtos compactos e de produtos de recarga. Também tem uma grande predisposição para a reciclagem e impacto positivo na disponibilização e da entrega desses resíduos mais domésticos no retalho alimentar. E nós vamos trabalhar afincadamente este ponto nas nossas lojas. E por último, confirmamos que de facto os clientes ainda não estão preparados e têm comportamentos restritivos relativamente à reutilização de embalagens quando vão fazer as suas compras. Por isso, ainda assim, nós na MC vamos continuar a investir nestes modelos de reutilização e agora também através da lente do PPWR, porque, e até ao horizonte de 2030, nós estamos confiantes que o cliente vai ter tempo para estar cada vez mais envolvido. Obrigada.
Bem, obrigada, Bruno, obrigada, Mafalda, obrigada, Ana, pelas vossas inspiradoras apresentações. São, sem dúvida, exemplos importantes do caminho para a circularidade. E estas soluções, sem dúvida, que fazem parte de um todo maior, como nós vimos também hoje ao início, também faz parte de um projeto da circularidade e daquilo que é a estratégia de sustentabilidade da SONAI e como estamos comprometidos com o amanhã. Está totalmente alinhado com aquilo que é o nosso compromisso com promover uma circularidade e no âmbito desta promoção da circularidade, efetivamente nós queremos fomentar cada vez mais novos modelos circulares, novos modelos que pensem na forma como podemos produzir e consumir, eliminar os desperdícios e promover aqui um prolongamento da vida dos nossos produtos para preservar cada vez mais os recursos naturais e os sistemas naturais. E contávamos já em 2023, com base não só nestas soluções que nos mostraram, mas noutras também, já mais de 90 milhões de euros resultantes destes negócios e queremos, obviamente, continuar a evoluir. E eu queria aproveitar aqui o gancho, no fundo, destes resultados para vos lançar aqui uma primeira questão. E se calhar queria aproveitar aqui também para começar pela Ana. No fundo, nós chegámos a estes resultados tão favoráveis, também com muitas lições aprendidas, que Ana já partilhaste aqui connosco, e não foi certamente tarefa fácil no contexto de tantas especificidades, porque neste contexto do Grupo SONAI os negócios são tão diferentes e nas nossas conversas, muitas vezes nas nossas reuniões, partilhamos essas dores, mas também esses desafios. E Ana, tu já nos deste aqui um bocadinho uns lamirés do que é que foram os desafios quando montaram este modelo do reuse e como é que poderiam instituir, no fundo, estes novos modelos de reutilização na MC, mas tenta-nos explicar aqui um pouco mais como é que vocês, perante estes desafios, eu sei que já disseste que não vão deixar de apostar no reuse, mas como é que, no fundo, viram estes desafios, como é que os tornaram aqui estas dificuldades em oportunidades, como é que os superaram e como é que estão a pensar aqui a evolução destes modelos, até nesta lógica de evolução do PPWR?
Sim. Como há pouco referi, Sónia, em toda a apresentação, os desafios foram bastante exigentes e para o retalho alimentar, de facto, é muito complexo esta alteração de processos operacionais e logísticos no nosso core, no core do nosso negócio. E por isso é preciso muita resiliência e também muito ajuste ao longo do projeto piloto. Tivemos que reajustar várias dimensões. Mas o que acontece é que, de facto, o refill e o reuse é uma nova plataforma e é uma nova plataforma para todos. Para consumidores, para produtores, para marcas, retalhistas, e por isso é preciso ainda cultivar e cultivar esta nova plataforma não é possível com um único stakeholder. Isso foi uma das grandes dores que também tivemos. Apesar de termos os nossos parceiros, fornecedores que nos apoiaram bastante, também as nossas equipas internas, principalmente de loja e também da logística, é preciso, de facto, cultivar e promover uma conversa que seja concertada entre vários stakeholders. Governo, legisladores, retalhistas, como um todo. Eu acho que só assim conseguiríamos ter aqui uma circularidade mais forte e modelos de reutilização também mais robustos.
E na perspectiva do cliente, o que é que estão a pensar fazer? Porque, sem dúvida, é um stakeholder importante, até para tentarmos melhorar estes números, não é?
No stakeholder, relativamente ao cliente, nós vamos continuar com as nossas iniciativas de refill de detergentes, refill on go. Nós fizemos alimentos secos, mas temos em vigor o refill de detergentes e vamos manter. É uma iniciativa que está a correr bem e não queremos perder essa oportunidade e vamos continuar a trabalhar o refill at home, ou seja, alargamos a nossa gama de produtos compactos e de recarga, uma vez que tem uma receptividade boa junto dos consumidores, e também o tema que falei relativamente ao return on the go, ou seja, estamos a preparar a implementação do sistema de depósito e reembolso de embalagens para ter um sistema bastante eficiente e conveniente para o consumidor, visto que é algo que ele valoriza bastante, é a comodidade e a conveniência nos modelos de reutilização, e também criarmos em paralelo ao sistema de depósito e reembolso de embalagens um espaço agregador nas nossas lojas, onde o cliente pode se dirigir de forma confortável para fazer o depósito dos seus resíduos domésticos e que atualmente até já recolhemos em loja. Mas criar um conceito novo e mais atrativo para o consumidor.
Obrigada, Ana. Agora, Mafalda, passava para ti. Naquele esquema parece tudo muito fácil quando estruturaram o Infinity, mas explica-nos um bocadinho mais o que é que foram os desafios e as dificuldades que sentiram ao longo da montagem desta iniciativa e deste produto e como é que os superaram, também para podermos partilhar com o público.
Bem, para a Salsaginhos, acho que o maior desafio, sem ser a questão de legislação que sai diariamente, é sem dúvida a reciclagem, garantir que existe uma reciclagem no fim de vida do nosso produto. Um dos nossos desafios ao longo desta cadeia, nós queríamos era garantir que no projeto, se não fosse reparável, porque, atenção, reparação é o nosso core, então teríamos e transformaríamos então esse produto noutro fio e introduziríamos na cadeia, porque nós não queremos estar a transformar num fio que depois irá ser usado noutras indústrias. Achamos que devíamos ter aqui um círculo fechado e devíamos então de aplicar depois na indústria têxtil. Esse é o maior desafio porque a indústria de reciclagem têxtil pós-consumo tem várias limitações. O facto da capacidade de separar, de triagem dos acessórios, depois também a capacidade de conseguirem reciclar, mas obrigando-nos a fazer uma separação por composição, por cor. Esses são os maiores dois pontos, aquilo que nós ouvíamos sempre quando procurávamos um parceiro. Depois, já há empresas que foram capazes de superar estas limitações, no entanto, têm diversas exigências. Por exemplo, uma exigência de quantidades mínimas, que neste momento o nosso programa não nos é possível obter. E, portanto, este caminho nós vamos continuar à procura de parceiro, digo já aqui que conseguimos encontrar, irão saber mais no futuro. E o nosso próximo passo será mesmo então fechar este ciclo e voltar a reintroduzir na nossa cadeia. Portanto, quando isto é só o primeiro passo para esta reciclagem, porque, dou já aqui a nota, ainda há um grande foco na parte da monomaterialidade, as exigências do algodão, e teremos que eventualmente passar para outro tipo de fibras e aí sim ainda continua a ser um desafio. Portanto, se vocês tiverem algum parceiro em mente, falem comigo.
Boa, estamos no sítio certo então para encontrar esse parceiro. Ótimo. Bruno, passava para ti porque, sem dúvida que em 2011, quando pensaram e estruturaram a iService, o contexto era totalmente diferente. Hoje em dia estamos num contexto muito apto. Como é que tem sido aqui ao longo destes anos acompanhar esta evolução e como é que têm sido estes desafios e como é que os têm superado para terem tão bons resultados hoje em dia?
Continua a ser um desafio diário. O desafio diário começa pela parte dos fornecedores, que é estar ao lado de fornecedores que nos entregam a qualidade que nós procuramos, que tenham a mesma linha de pensamento que nós e que depois também tenham as quantidades que nós necessitamos. E, portanto, isso é um desafio diário de acompanhamento de tudo o que é a base de fornecimento e passando por esta fase da retoma em que sabemos que no futuro, cada vez mais, os equipamentos que vendemos vão ser adquiridos diretamente aos nossos clientes. Depois, do ponto de vista tecnológico, porque o software para nós é um desafio, será sempre um desafio. Nós sabemos que determinados equipamentos que são vendidos no mercado estão aptos para serem utilizados durante 6, 7, 8, 9 anos e, na verdade, em média, são usados durante 2 ou 3. E, portanto, é necessário que as peças que nós utilizamos sejam reconhecidas pelos equipamentos, que o software não nos diga que não é possível utilizar. E é importante que os equipamentos também, ao longo do tempo, que possam ser atualizados, que as aplicações mais recentes que sejam possíveis de introduzir nos nossos equipamentos e que o software seja atualizável. E isto tudo leva para a regulação. A regulação parece-me que é o caminho mais rápido, é a chave disto tudo. É importante, nós hoje em dia, como eu disse há pouco, operamos em Portugal, Espanha, França e Bélgica. A França será o país, a França e a Bélgica também têm uma série de iniciativas, mas a França é um bom exemplo. É um país onde Os franceses conseguem reparar o seu equipamento a menos 25 euros do que reparam em Portugal. Existe um incentivo do governo para uma reparação por ano, por cada equipamento, 25 euros são abatidos de imediato. E, garantidamente, a taxa de conversão que temos em França, nas nossas lojas em França, é muito superior à taxa de conversão que temos em Portugal. Praticamos os mesmos preços, por enquanto, pela Europa fora, e em França é mais barato. E, portanto, o caminho terá que ser esse. O caminho terá que ser a obrigação de o software não ficar bloqueado tão cedo. A iniciativa terá que ser, certamente, uma redução dos impostos para o lado do cliente.
Sim, Bruno, se calhar aproveitava esse gancho também para te perguntar, então, o que é que desta experiência, e até pela diversidade geográfica que tem, as lições aprendidas, porque acho que no contexto deste fórum, e em particular desta sessão, de certeza que os participantes desta sessão querem retirar daqui alguns takeaways e o que é que eles podem fazer quando amanhã chegarem às suas empresas e quiserem implementar, se não estão já a implementar, ações de circularidade. O que é que são as tuas lições aprendidas deste processo?
Acho que é muito importante ter uma missão, não é? Olhando para o meu caso prático, a minha missão teria sido, e foi na altura, em 2011, reparar o meu smartphone. O smartphone devia ter cerca de 4 meses, não tinha nenhuma vontade de o mandar para o lixo, apesar dos fabricantes me dizerem na altura que não havia solução de reparação, e, portanto, o meu objetivo foi claro e óbvio, reparar smartphones. Hoje em dia, reparar o smartphone, reparar efetivamente o meu smartphone. Hoje em dia o meu objetivo é o mesmo, mas com uma escala um pouco superior.
Claro.
E, portanto, o meu conselho será definirmos bem a nossa missão, os objetivos, com clareza. A partir do momento em que temos a missão bem definida, penso que vamos falar dela de uma forma orgulhosa. E, portanto, eu orgulhosamente digo que 100% dos equipamentos que utilizamos na iServices são recondicionados. Os telemóveis que damos às pessoas para trabalhar, os computadores que damos para trabalhar, e trabalhamos de igual forma a outra empresa qualquer do mercado, e orgulhosamente são recondicionados. E depois passar à fase da formação. Se as pessoas assimilarem isto, vai ser muito mais fácil depois partilhar e chegarmos ao nosso objetivo final. Portanto, lanço o desafio a quem aqui está, no momento em que tudo é tão descartável na nossa sociedade, há certamente muitas oportunidades no mercado para a circularidade. Não será por acaso que há uma série de empresas emergentes a vender artigos de segunda mão e artigos de segunda mão na área do luxo também. E, portanto, há uma série de oportunidades à nossa volta. É mais uma tarefa de reflexão, ver no nosso dia-a-dia o que podemos fazer de diferente.
Ótimo. Mafalda.
Bem, aquilo que vos posso ajudar, dar-vos como um conselho é não olhem para o que as outras marcas, as outras empresas estão a fazer. Porque nem tudo que nós vemos é a forma mais correta de alcançar ou a melhor forma de alcançar a circularidade. Cada empresa, cada marca deve realmente analisar, refletir aquilo que faz mais sentido para ela, estando sempre alinhados com a capacidade que têm de atuar, vindo sempre do início ao fim e, pronto, no nosso caso, tendo sempre em mente se vão recolher, ter sempre uma forma, então, de depois dar um fim de vida correto, então é essa peça, ou então consegui-la voltar ao circuito da circularidade. Para além disso, ouçam feedback dos vossos clientes, porque a maior parte de nós temos sempre ideias e às vezes até podemos tirar alguma coisa aí interessante. Portanto, ponham-se no lugar do cliente e, por fim, acho que ouvindo estas 3 experiências, estes 3 projetos, conseguimos perceber que esse é o caminho.
Sim. E acho que toca muito com o que a Ana, inclusive, fechou na apresentação dela, efetivamente ouvir os clientes e ouvir o que é que eles precisam. Ana, no vosso caso, realmente foram escutar os clientes e têm trabalhado também próximos com os parceiros. Que lições é que podem partilhar com o público?
E começando mesmo com esse ponto dos clientes, na fase de conceitualização e definição dos objetivos, dos modelos que vocês querem testar e implementar, antes de mais, ouçam os vossos clientes, tentem perceber o que é que eles gostariam de experimentar e de que forma. E também simplificar soluções. O Keep Simple é essencial para a reutilização, para as reuse models. O Keep Simple a nível de experiência de cliente, Customer Journey, também Keep Simple nas nossas operações, nós é essencial para conseguirmos atingir sucesso e conseguirmos ganhar alguma escalabilidade. E o awareness também é importante. Ter uma estratégia de comunicação in-store, ter uma estratégia de comunicação nos canais digitais, ter uma estratégia também de pricing, porque o que se verifica, por exemplo, no caso da venda a granel, é que muitas vezes é percepcionado pelo consumidor que o valor a granel é mais caro do que o produto que está vendido na prateleira. E isso não é verdade. O valor a granel habitualmente é 10% a 15%, tem um valor PVP mais baixo. E isso é muito importante. Por isso, mensagens claras e simples. Por fim, não existe uma solução única, como estava a falar a referir. O que nós vemos à escala global, e apesar daquele benchmark 2021, neste momento estamos todos no mesmo patamar. À escala global não existe uma solução que de facto tenha vingado e neste momento estamos todos, retalhistas, marcas, produtores, a fazer experimentação destes modelos de reutilização. E por isso, e não desistir, porque de facto a abordagem deve ser experimentar, testar, aprender, ajustar e se calhar voltar a experimentar com outra solução.
Eu acho que fechamos de uma forma ótima, porque sem dúvida vamos aqui mensagens importantes. Acho que se todos fizermos e testarmos e começarmos com pilotos que mesmo possamos ir escalando de uma forma progressiva, vamos lá chegar e vamos chegar a uma forma de podermos ter modelos sem dúvida mais escaláveis e fomentar um consumo mais circular e repensar melhor a nossa forma e aquilo que os nossos consumidores podem inclusive atuar e portanto acho que vai ser muito importante e é muito importante estes takeaways que tiramos daqui. E portanto eu agradeço-vos aos três pelo vosso dinamismo, por continuarem a fazer este excelente trabalho e também junto das nossas empresas e de certeza contagiaram todos aqui nesta sala e quem nos está a ouvir. Portanto, obrigada mais uma vez pela vossa presença e continuem o excelente trabalho. E espero que todos também sigam o vosso exemplo. Obrigada.
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 Boa tarde, mais uma vez. Ainda temos muito para ouvir hoje, mas primeiro vou agradecer aos nossos oradores que estiveram connosco e que compartilharam estas aprendizagens e estes desafios tão práticos das nossas realidades, das vossas realidades. Eu sei que no início, eu estou a ver a sala cada vez mais cheia e mais composta, temos lotação esgotada, o que me deixa muito feliz, mas para quem não estava no início, quando eu fiz a minha apresentação, e tendo em conta as palavras do Bruno Borges, eu disse precisamente que este iPad que eu tenho na minha mão foi comprado na Wharton Reuse, portanto é recondicionado, tem menos de um ano e funciona em perfeitas condições. Ora, ainda temos muito para ouvir e para ver e para aprender durante esta tarde, mas antes vamos fazer agora um curto intervalo. Eu sugiro que aproveitem este tempo para descontraírem, para partilharem as vossas ideias uns com os outros, também para partilharem ideias com os nossos parceiros e explorarem estes estantes que estão a ver do vosso lado esquerdo e do vosso lado direito e conhecerem as soluções inovadoras que estão a transformar, no fundo, a circularidade em Portugal. Para quem está aí a acompanhar-nos online, utilizem um chat para interagir e explorarem os stands virtuais através do menu que podem ver no vosso site. Nós voltamos às 16h50. Até já! Posso? Vamos começar? Ok. Boa tarde. Estamos de volta. Vou aqui fazer um pequenino compasso de espera enquanto vos peço para que regressem aos vossos lugares. Ainda temos intervenções bastante importantes e interessantes ao longo desta tarde e relembro a todos que depois teremos um momento final de cocktail onde poderão continuar a fazer o vosso networking e onde poderão continuar a partilhar as vossas ideias e relaxar mais um pouco. Pedia então mais uma vez, por favor, aos nossos participantes que regressem aos seus lugares para não resvalarmos no tempo, porque temos já um painel bastante interessante já a seguir. Pedia-vos por isso que retornassem aos vossos lugares com a maior brevidade possível. Eu sei que temos casa cheia, sei que já estamos todos numa fase mais relaxada e ainda bem, porque é também isso que nós queremos, que vocês se sintam bem, bem acolhidos. Já sim, agora sim a sala está a compor-se. Peço então, por favor, faço uma última chamada. One last call, please, to everyone to get back to your seats, because we are going to start the second part of this Innovation Forum. Muito obrigada. Obrigada por estarem a regressar aos vossos lugares. Vamos então dar início a esta segunda parte. Já temos o nosso próximo speaker connosco. Welcome to the second part of today's inspiring and insightful program. We will now delve you into the economic and environmental opportunities present by the circular economy, focusing on how to transform these opportunities into scalable and viable business models. To kick off this session, para iniciarmos esta sessão de segunda parte, it's my pleasure to invite to the stage Anders Hallen, expert associate partner at McKinsey Material Economist and with an extensive expertise in circularity, decarbonization and net zero strategies. Please welcome Anders Hallen. Anders, please come to the stage. Thank you.
Obrigado. Okay, great. Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about circular business opportunities. Hope to be not too repetitive with all of the previous speakers here, but we can start first at the why, of course, and we heard a lot about that. Many things to say. Here in Europe, we use about 2,200 kilograms of different type of materials, such as the major metals, cement, food, plastics, glass per year. And this, of course, has a huge impact on the planet. For example, it's about 1/3 of CO2 emissions, even more depending on how you count it, if we include land use and so on. But especially if we don't find a more efficient way of using the materials, we will never be able to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And that's, of course, telling us that we want to do it, but then the question is, can we become more circular? And turning on to that, we believe that we are at sort of a circularity tipping point now at this moment. And reason being is that there are several forces coming to play at the same time. Maybe for those of you who have gone to business school have used like a Porter's 5 forces framework. It's a little bit similar one here. And of course, we have policy and regulation driving this.
In Europe, just to take some examples, EU ETS with the phase-out of free allocations that will actually put a real price on primary materials and brown materials, together with the carbon border adjustment mechanism to protect us then at the borders. Product regulations, such as the end-of-life vehicle directive, putting a requirement on 25% recycled plastics and other materials in vehicles, and actually 25% of that being in a closed loop as well. So policy is moving strongly. And then on the cost and CO2, actually one of the most cost-efficient ways of reducing CO2 emissions is by more circular measures. We've done many different studies on sort of how you can reach a net zero target for Europe, for example, and most cost-efficient one clearly than with more circular economy measures into this. I won't go through all of these, but you see it goes on then with value chain pressure from companies putting targets and asking their suppliers. And of course as well, technologies improving very quickly, such as advanced sorting technologies with laser spectrometry, chemical recycling that we'll take a case example on soon, etc. So all of these forces acting at the same time. And then what's interesting with this is that we looked together with some investors on what can this mean as a business opportunity. And we mapped the size of the circular economy business. And then, of course, it's hard to have an exact definition on how you define that and what you include. But with the definitions that we put up here, within the areas of circular business models, material recycling, material efficiency, can be such things as using products as a service instead, using prefabricated materials in construction, etc. And also approaches to handling residual waste, such as putting this into new valuable uses, such as sustainable aviation fuels, biomethanol, etc. And we believe that there can be a 5 times increase of the size of the revenues in these markets from about 160 billion euros today, which is mainly in recycling metals, especially steel, e-commerce in fashion and e-commerce. And this could grow to about 820 billion euros in 2040. Due to all of these different forces coming in and all of the new type of business models coming up. And again, do we see these things happening? Well, we also mapped here just the amount of startups that's starting in these type of businesses. Everything from doing circular business models, material efficiency, and circular materials. And you see here several different business models that you can use, and there are startups upon startups starting up here. And I'm going to take just one example on this, one from the chemical recycling space, which is a very promising space for actually one way how we can handle plastics as there is, and other type of chemicals such as rubber that I will talk a little bit more about. And one has hoped for chemical recycling for long. There are not that many companies scaling yet. But taking one example from myself, I'm from Scandinavia and Sweden, and there's a company called Envirosystems who try to solve one big problem, if we take just one out of all of these that we see here, in tires. And there's a market of about 40 million tons of tires being produced globally yearly. And this can mean something like 180 million tons of CO2 emissions. And of course, a lot of other problems coming with that. Microplastic leakage to water and other parts of the environment. And a big addressable market. And what this company does, as just one case example here out of those many that I showed you before, is that they have a technology called pyrolysis, where you actually then heat up a material, so a discarded tire, for example, in an environment without oxygen. And then you can turn this into carbon black that you can do new tires of, and also a pyrolysis oil that you can put into chemical processes to produce new fuels and the like. And you get about 90% lower CO2 emissions compared to other recycling technologies that you have today with this, such as the furnace black process in this. And of course, we won't be able to sort of discern here exactly why EnviroSystems are successful with their technology, but I want to say a few words from a business perspective, what they have done well in this. And they have been around for many years. They were founded already 20 years ago, but they have been really scaling up lately. And the things that they have done is, one, they have signed partnerships with companies like Michelin, Trelleborg, and others to secure a customer in this. And then they have also signed a partnership with some investors called Entin Infrastructure Partners, who are now investing into helping them scaling up their production. So they are building the first commercial scale plant in Uddevalla, Sweden. And together with Entin, they have put a target on scaling up this, building more plants until they can handle about 30% of the end-of-use tires in Europe by 2030. Let's see exactly how quickly it can go, as with all of these green scale-ups. But this combination of finding investors, locking up customers, locking up your supply of the circular materials to really get one of these circular business models going has been really efficient for them. Then last thing I want to say, I mean, this from more of the startup perspective, but also if you are more of a corporate looking into this and seeing how can I become more circular. It's a bit of a challenge. It's less sort of well-defined. There's good ways of setting up your targets for how much CO2 emissions you are reduce, setting a science-based targets or the likes. But we are a circular business. You really need to find the ways of how can I connect this with the business, as I believe Rafael from Circular talked about earlier today as well. Just 4 quick things that one can think about, and let's see if I add anything to what you said earlier, Rafael. But one is, first, your circular diagnostic and seeing where can I find both a profitability opportunity and a circular opportunity, CO2 opportunity at the same time. And you can't do all of the possible initiatives at the same time. Finding your top 5 to 10 circular risks and opportunities that you should prioritize. Second one is sort of thinking big. How can I make my aftermarket business with more than things like services and the likes? 2 times, 3 times the growth of my regular business, to making this the big thing in the coming years. Thirdly, many companies struggle with how they're going to reduce the CO2 emissions and have made strong commitments on that. And often circular business models is the best way of finding this at a really low cost. We often call it a dual mission with cost and decarbonization at the same time. And then finally, how can you make a really good circular business build? And often that can mean partnerships along the value chain, locking up both your supply of secondary materials and finding that and ensuring, and locking up customers as well that want to commit to certain volumes for you. So you can do this as a more secure investment, like an infrastructure-like investment opportunities. Okay, there's a few short words here on some of the business opportunities within circularity, and hope we all can hope for that. I'm right that we are at this circular inflection point now and a big mega trend in this.
Thank you, Anders, for your presentation. And now we are having a talk with another speaker. That's why Anders is still here with us. So to further explore these ideas and dive deeper into some of these conclusions, I'd like to welcome and invite Filipa Pantaleão to the stage. She's the Secretary General of the Business Council for Sustainable Development, Portugal. Welcome, Filipa. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much for your insightful presentation, Anders. Let me just take a brief moment to thank Sonai for this wonderful event. Sonai has been a founding member of BCSD Portugal, and over the years we've been working with around circularity, but also other.
Bem, eu já fiz tantos.
So thank you so much for joining us today. So you've mentioned the 6 forces that you think that are driving towards circularity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that today, at least, the market forces are strong enough to do this market transformation?
Well, it's a good question, and probably the $1,000 question as well, right? Is this strong enough? I think they will need to continue to accelerate. I mean, there's a lot of questions on how quickly policy will continue to develop. I think it's fantastic what has happened so far. If one would sort of go back 10, 15, 20 years and look at the type of policies that are being introduced or have been introduced up until today in the EU, that would probably sort of been like a Christmas list for someone from the sort of environmental side or NGO side. So I think that's moved really quickly, and I think it will continue to do so. But all of these forces need to continue to develop. I mean, for example, companies start to retract a little bit from their obligations if they are not prepared to maybe pay a little bit more before things come into the money and so on. But I believe what I'm seeing now is that it's really sort of moving quickly enough, and it's quite impressive with some of the policies, as I mentioned, the end-of-life vehicle directive and so on. And then also another way to look at this, these numbers that I showed before, I mentioned that we developed that together with our investor. Someone wants to read a report. It's from Summa Equity, private equity investors, and on Circularity report. And I mean, these are hard-nosed investors that look at this and really believe in these type of numbers, and also sort of encourage the rest of the investment community to invest in this as well. We also sort of see that happens. We all need to go after this to make it happen, putting in money and investment into this.
And have you seen it quite early, like in the past 2 years, or it's really accelerating, do you think?
No, I mean, I think I see a bigger and bigger interest in these type of business opportunities.
Services or products, whatever.
Yep.
Right? Yep. And if you could say just one, what do you think is the major problem or difficult for companies to really address circularity in a much better practical way, at least?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. So I think one issue is that sort of if you let it sort of oppose your current way of making business, your normal linear way of making business. So I looked at this together with many incumbent companies, and of course there are internal tensions, because the way that you measure today, the way that we measure volumes, we measure market shares in terms often of how much then new sales of products that you have, not how much part of, for example, if I take vehicles, like I work with a company that produce a type of light vehicle, and they measure all of their market shares and how they compete against others on new sales, not that sort of how much of the total fleet in the market do we actually work with. So that's one thing that they sort of need to shift a bit in the mindset, and often also when they look at can we use more long-term rentals and different ways of keeping your vehicles in control, they also look at and see, well, profitability is interesting on these circular business models, but we earn maybe even more if I just compare a like for like with selling a new vehicle. Then of course what they then need to take into consideration that I lose this business otherwise to someone else doing this. So bringing in such concepts as value preservation, not only new sales and so on. So I think that's an important part. And of course, there's ways of solving that. One company I work with, they needed to separate this new business and actually in the organization. So they are looking at...
to empower it, I think.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is a company that tried to do more refurbishment of mining vehicles, for example. And then they would have that same type of problem there. And then they created a separate organizational unit, a new business head for that. So it was better clear and sort of letting that competition be almost internal instead and having a business head for that circular business. I'm saying that that's the way that you always need to do it, but you need to figure out how you create the right incentives.
So it can work inside your company. And for example, for a small company, what piece of advice would you give for them to start this journey? Because I think it's quite different from a bigger company to a smallest one. What would you say?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, one thing is really finding the business model and defining your customers and how you're going to make that business model work. I mean, focus on that first. You can have, which is of course important, having the big vision on, I showed some number for one company, right, how much CO2 they could reduce and how much problems they can solve, which of course need to be in the mission.
For your value chain? Okay.
Yeah, so that part of course is very important, having their vision, but really understanding how can I make the economics of this work for my customers, where am I going to go first, how am I going to grow, how can I sort of scale this up in a reasonable way. So, and it's of course the same type of questions that you ask yourself for most kind of startups and growing, but being really focused in this and understanding where policy, targets from companies and so on, that you really come in and solve a real problem and can make a business model out of this work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. As Yvonne Bojo mentioned it, the World BCSD is currently developing a global circularity protocol that is quite similar to GHG protocol for emissions. It's co-developing it with Deloitte and also with Circle Economy. And in your view and your perspective, how could this initiative support and really accelerate this transformation?
I think number one, just saying, it's amazing what the WBCSD has done over the years, first with the greenhouse gas protocol, now also working with PACT and how you can do product carbon footprints and so on, and then now yet another really important initiative. And lots of the companies that I work with, they really struggle with how are you going to measure circularity. It's not as clear as the definitions. There are several different things that you can measure this on, sort of the ingoing materials that have business models, material efficiency and so on. And also hard to show and compare to others. And
variability.
Not as clear, right? And seeing sort of like with greenhouse gas, it's hard enough following the greenhouse gas protocol and others and setting the targets there. So I think
and also regarding greenwashing, right? So it's a level playing field, it's necessary.
Exactly. I mean, there's many companies who can sort of say that I'm very circular today, even though many people have shown during this day, right, that we are not there today. And this creates some real problems. For example, one company that I work with, they do circular computers or laptops and mobile phones and have sort of like device as a service offerings. And they are challenged by that they try to make their devices have a second, third, fourth life. And their competitors, they maybe instead tell the customer you're going to have a really long first life, and that's going to be the end of it. And if you look at the CO2 reporting for that can actually look better because you actually don't capture the way that we calculate today the second and the third life. So that's a big challenge for them and showing, and also a big challenge for the customers as they sort of need to report CO2 in a good way or a very strict way. And now, hopefully, we can get a better way to capturing circularity in this that tells the real story.
Let's hope so. In your perspective, how do you see for the next 5 years, how circularity or business worldwide will change regarding this topic?
Yeah, I think we will see a lot more circular business models such as product as a service, companies having a much larger part of their business in those parts. I think that we will
and also being more transparent about it, right?
Yes, definitely. And I also think you will see, I mean, we have materials like steel today that are very circular. I think that this will move in a lot more into plastics, aluminium, which today is recycled a lot, but it's being downgraded a lot. It sort of starts as a very advanced material, and then it gets going into sort of like a motor block in a internal combustion engine, and we are not going to have so much more internal combustion engines. So it's going to change a lot there, and keeping the values of materials a lot more. I think that a lot of companies see, as in one study that we did, and we saw that in the first use cycle, all of the materials that you put into your products in Europe, you lose about 60% of the value just in one use cycle, and there's a huge value getting lost here. And I think that in 5 years, a lot more companies will try to capture as much as possible of this value because it's a waste that they can't live with.
Really. So like a final message and hopeful, a bright one, what do you think, what do you perspective into circularity? Do you think it will be, we are hopeful, we should be hopeful or not?
Yes, of course. No, but I'm very hopeful. I mean, especially as this is one area where the economics and the environmental benefits really can go hand in hand. It's sometimes a little bit more difficult because you need to work across your full value chain. You need to collaborate both upstream and downstream.
Of course.
But
a lot of collaboration, right?
Exactly. So a lot of opportunities for partnerships and so on in this. And if we solve that, I think it has a very bright future.
So thank you, Anders, for this hopeful vision, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, Filippa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Filipa and Anders, for such an insightful conversation. You truly inspired us and given us so much to think about and reflect on. Nós agora vamos aqui arrumar um bocadinho a casa para preparar já a sessão que se segue. Vamos dar palco aos use cases agora que nos vão trazer exemplos práticos sobre como transformar desafios em oportunidades de negócio sustentável. E eu sei que isto vos interessa a muitos de vós. Vamos mostrar caminhos concretos para a integração da circularidade nas operações empresariais e esta sessão traz-nos precisamente um exemplo concreto de como os resíduos podem ser transformados numa fonte de energia limpa e renovável, provando que os desafios ambientais podem ser convertidos em grandes oportunidades de negócios. Apresento-vos Cristiano Amaro, responsável pelo setor de biometano na Cape Watt, onde lidera o desenvolvimento e a gestão de produção de biometano em Portugal, em Espanha e em Itália. Bem-vindo, Cristiano.
Boa tarde a todos. É um enorme privilégio estar aqui no Innovators Forum 2024. Meu nome é Cristiano Amaro, sou Head de Biometano da Capwatt, uma empresa líder na transição energética. Hoje trago-vos um tema que considero fascinante, mas ao mesmo tempo muito importante para o futuro: tratar resíduos orgânicos para produzir energia limpa. Falarei sobre biometano, um gás natural de origem renovável, que pode ajudar a resolver problemas ambientais, mas também a descarbonizar setores cruciais da nossa economia. Gostaria de começar com um interessante facto. Sabiam que, em 2030, 30% do consumo industrial de gás natural da Europa pode ser suprido com uma gestão sustentável de resíduos orgânicos? Isto é o equivalente ao consumo de um país como Espanha. Este dado demonstra o potencial transformador do gás natural de origem renovável, o biometano. Mas, afinal, o que é isto de biometano? Os resíduos orgânicos podem ser decompostos por bactérias num ambiente sem oxigênio. Esse processo de composição chama-se digestão anaeróbia e desse processo resulta um gás bruto, o biogás. O biogás, devidamente purificado para a remoção das suas impurezas, dá origem ao biometano, que pode ser injetado nas redes de gás natural ou pode ser utilizado como biocombustível nos veículos. Os subprodutos do processo de digestão anaeróbia podem também ter um papel fundamental no fecho do círculo de sustentabilidade do setor primário. Porquê? Porque podem ser usados como fertilizantes orgânicos que podem substituir o uso de fertilizantes convencionais e assim também ajudar a descarbonizar o setor agrícola. Vamos então olhar para que problemas é que este setor, o setor do biometano, pode ajudar a resolver. Por um lado, sabemos que entre 1997 e 2022, as emissões de gases de efeito de estufa associadas à pecuária, num contexto global, subiram 18%. Isto diz bem da urgência que é tratar devidamente aquilo que são os efluentes deste setor. Um caso muito específico é o caso do setor suinícola de Espanha. Espanha tinha em 2020 32 milhões de suínos para produzir 5 milhões de toneladas de carne por ano, que geraram em 2020 60 milhões de toneladas de chorume. Mas esta é apenas uma parte da equação. Por outro lado, temos os chamados setores hard to abate, do lado do consumo. São essencialmente os setores que consomem energia térmica em instalações industriais, energia térmica de alta temperatura e de alta pressão, e também os transportes rodoviários de mercadorias de longa distância. Portanto, estes setores são muito dificilmente, ou com elevada dificuldade, descarbonizáveis com soluções de eletricidade. E é aqui que o biometano pode realmente ter um papel fundamental, contribuir para a descarbonização destes setores com uma solução prática, uma solução mais ou menos de fácil implementação. Tendo isto em conta, a Comissão Europeia, em 2022, lançou o plano REPowerEU para reduzir a dependência do gás russo, que era de cerca de 30% em 2020. E, portanto, na definição do Repower EU, definiu como target para 2030 a contribuição do biometano em 35 mil milhões de metros cúbicos por ano. Este target compara com um dado de produção em 2022 de 4,2 mil milhões de metros cúbicos. Portanto, há aqui caminho a fazer, há trabalho pela frente, mas há realmente possibilidade de lá chegarmos. Porquê? Porque os países que até agora maior sucesso tiveram no desenvolvimento deste setor foram essencialmente os países que perceberam e que entenderam já há algum tempo o valor das externalidades positivas associadas ao biometano. E, portanto, reconhecem isso em fortes incentivos à produção. Não há outra forma de fazer. Portanto, a Alemanha, a França, aqui incluindo também o Reino Unido, a Dinamarca e até a própria Itália, têm incentivos à produção que reconhecem estas externalidades. Os 35 BCMs de target identificados pela Comissão comparam com um potencial de 38 que os estudos nos dizem que realmente é possível de fazer. Naturalmente, que a Alemanha, a França, a Itália, a Dinamarca continuam a ser os países com mais potencial, mas há um país que realmente se percebe que está por explorar neste setor, que é a Espanha. Portanto, Espanha, sobretudo no que diz respeito ao agropecuário, tem aqui um grande papel também digamos que no alcance deste objetivo. Na Capuote, estamos a fazer parte da solução e a desenvolver projetos como a central de produção de biometano de Aljustrel. Basicamente, em Aljustrel, estamos a terminar a construção da unidade agora, estamos a falar de uma unidade com uma área de implantação de cerca de 2 hectares. Nesta unidade, vamos produzir energia, 57 gigawatt-hora de biometano, suficiente para abastecer o equivalente ao consumo de 97 caminhões de mercadorias por ano, evitando assim a emissão de 24 mil toneladas de CO2 equivalente por ano. Isto tudo tratando 164 mil toneladas de águas residuais da indústria do azeite, portanto, uma indústria com uma forte presença na região do Alentejo, e 20 mil toneladas de estrume de galinha por ano. Estes números mostram que, também em Portugal, o biometano não é apenas uma ideia, mas é também uma realidade concreta com impacto mensurável, caracterizando com uma imagem aquilo que é uma unidade de produção de biometano. Para concluir, gostaria de destacar 3 mensagens. Caminho para um sistema energético neutro em carbono exige mais do que eletricidade renovável, naturalmente. É desafiante descarbonizar os setores hard to abate apenas com eletricidade. O biometano, portanto, pode ser uma solução low-hanging fruit, que alia uma adequada gestão de resíduos orgânicos à produção de energia limpa de aplicação imediata. Os subprodutos resultantes do processo podem ser utilizados como fertilizantes orgânicos, que evitam também a utilização de fertilizantes convencionais, fechando o círculo de sustentabilidade no setor primário. Portanto, não estamos a falar de uma nova fonte de energia, mas sim de uma mudança de paradigma onde os resíduos deixam de ser um problema e se tornam parte da solução. Muito obrigado pela vossa atenção. Não hesitem em entrar em contacto comigo, será um prazer continuarmos esta conversa.
Agradecer ao Cristiano pela partilha da sua experiência e pelos contributos valiosos sobre como a transformação de resíduos pode gerar, sim, soluções sustentáveis e de alto impacto, como acabamos de ver, assim como as oportunidades que surgiram na transformação dos resíduos em energia limpa. Nesta próxima sessão, vamos conhecer um exemplo prático de como a inovação e a reciclagem podem caminhar lado a lado para criar soluções sustentáveis e com impacto. Teremos 2 casos interligados que mostram que as empresas podem reinventar os seus processos para promover a circularidade. Apresento-vos o Nuno Calado, gestor de regulação de madeira e sustentabilidade na Sonai Arauco, que nos trará uma visão sobre como a reciclagem pode, sim, impulsionar a inovação, ao mesmo tempo que reforça a sustentabilidade nos negócios. Depois, após apresentar o seu use case, será o Nuno a ter o gosto de chamar a palco a Ana Barbosa, Sustainability Manager da IKEA Portugal, para juntos apresentarem o caso da IKEA e da Sonai Arauco. Depois, será a Ana que dará continuidade à sessão e partilhará como a IKEA aplica estes princípios de circularidade e sustentabilidade no seu trabalho. Quero dar as boas-vindas ao Nuno Calado. Nuno, por favor, o palco é seu. Bem-vindo.
Boa tarde a todos. Aqui falar sobre um processo um bocadinho diferente e um case diferente em contexto industrial. Portanto, a Sonai Arauco é uma empresa B2B com operações industriais em Portugal, na Espanha, na Alemanha e na África do Sul. Portanto, uma realidade um bocadinho diferente. Somos uma empresa que faz painéis derivados de madeira, que tenta encontrar soluções que possam contribuir para esta nossa visão de ter um planeta melhor, um futuro melhor, uma vida melhor. Portanto, é este o alinhamento que nós fazemos. O que é que nós fabricamos? Quais são os nossos produtos? Temos aglomerado de partículas, MDF e OSB, digamos que os nossos produtos base, se quiserem assim dizer, com aplicações para design de interiores, mobiliário, construção. Depois temos a nossa linha, a nossa marca Inovos, portanto uma linha de painéis decorativos para fazer design de interiores com uma variedade de padrões, texturas, cores. Aqui praticamente o céu é o limite, estamos quase lá. E por fim o Impactam, o nosso sistema, a nossa marca de construção para isolamentos, telhados, painéis, esse tipo de questões. Aqui, esta não era a última versão, mas seguimos em frente. As nossas origens de consumo, obviamente, são controladas de forma criteriosa, com certificação, com controle sobre as origens. E, por fim, temos a questão da madeira. A madeira é a nossa matéria-prima base, é onde tudo começa, é um material de excelência, é um material nobre, tem características sensoriais, tanto que mexem connosco, mas em particular tem estas funções muito importantes. É um material natural, renovável e reciclável, com esta questão extra. Pela capacidade da árvore, quando cresce, faz a fotossíntese, todos isso, demos isto na escola, ela retém carbono no lenho, na madeira. E esse carbono fica retido na madeira enquanto a madeira estiver em uso, em atividade, enquanto a madeira circular. E já vão perceber porquê. Este é o nosso modelo de bioeconomia circular. Nós temos, se quiserem, 3 fontes de abastecimento. Temos madeira que vem diretamente da floresta, portanto, uma madeira de pequena dimensão, que portanto, tem outro tipo de funções para ajudar a floresta a crescer. Consumimos também subprodutos da indústria da madeira, portanto, serrações, carpintarias, com o seu processo de fabrico, geram serrins, tilha, bocados de madeira, consumimos também isso. E quando os produtos de madeira que são fabricados, uma mobília, seja o que for, chegam ao seu fim de vida, portanto, após o uso do consumidor, e esperemos que com reutilizações, tudo aquilo que temos aqui falado hoje, quando chegam a esse fim de vida, nós conseguimos reaproveitar esses resíduos de madeira e incorporá-los nos nossos produtos. Só enquanto a madeira estiver em uso é que ela é circular, mantém essas funções e mantém o carbono retido. É essas as suas principais funções. Só deve ser queimado, madeira só deve ser queimada quando não tem mais nenhuma aplicação enquanto material. Portanto, esta deve ser a função principal. Por isso é que esta questão é particularmente relevante, porque sem termos esta perspectiva, e vocês aqui veem alguns exemplos do tipo de resíduos de madeira que nós conseguimos reutilizar, Temos paletes, embalagens, questões logísticas, temos resíduos de madeira que vêm de ações de reconstrução e demolição, temos mobiliário, tudo isto pode ser reutilizado e tem mais-valias enormes face ao que é o processo normal. Onde é que nós estamos atualmente? No aglomerado de partículas, atualmente já conseguimos incorporar 70% de resíduos de madeira nos nossos painéis de aglomerado de partículas. Só o ano passado consumimos mais de 700 mil toneladas de resíduos de madeira. Isto é só resíduos de madeira, não é o total da madeira que nós consumimos. Portanto, é um volume, portanto, uma dimensão já muito expressiva do que é o nosso consumo atual. Isto é conseguido, portanto, evoluímos imenso, passem a modéstia à parte, mas nos últimos 10 anos, portanto, subimos de cerca de 40% para 70%. Isto é conseguido também muito através dos nossos centros de reciclagem, que temos 12 em Portugal e Espanha. Fomos pioneiros e inovadores neste processo, portanto, quando começámos, foi por uma questão que falou-se já aqui hoje também, de gestão de risco, de ter uma abordagem estratégica para o risco e para o futuro, portanto, pensando em novos abastecimentos. Foi preciso fazer muito investimento, muita inovação para se conseguir chegar onde estamos hoje. Há uma complexidade de gerir estes resíduos, de os limpar e todos esses investimentos para incorporar mais reciclado nas linhas de produção, para conseguir limpar mais o material. Tudo isso foi sendo feito e, por fim, temos 2 exemplos que é o que estamos agora a concretizar. Estamos a construir 2 centros de reciclagem em Portugal, um em Valença e outro na Azambuja, e temos estes processos agora de inovação, em que o mais relevante é o da nova linha em Mangualde que estamos a construir, que vai permitir, pela primeira vez no mundo, incorporar fibra reciclada em novos painéis de fibra. Portanto, este é um processo inovador e que implicou muito co-desenvolvimento com os fornecedores destas tecnologias que não estavam adaptadas à nossa realidade. Por fim, desafios e constrangimentos. Temos 2, e aqui falo muito aqui do caso português, que são de posição em aterros e a bioenergia. Ainda ontem saiu, por curiosidade, um despacho com um grupo de trabalho especial para arranjar uma solução, porque não há capacidade para os nossos aterros, portanto, já devíamos estar a encerrar aterros e estamos ainda com este stress. Portanto, nós temos muita madeira que vai para aterro, muita madeira que é queimada, portanto, e isto não é viável se queremos, de facto, são bloqueios à circularidade, e é preciso ultrapassar esta questão. Eu vou-vos aqui mostrar só um filme que é a estreia mundial, que representa bem o que eu aqui falei.
This wooden desk is an object of great value to Sonai Arauco. What if we destroy it? Confusing, isn't it? By dismantling this desk, we make sure it doesn't end up in a landfill where it no longer has any use. And the more often it can be dismantled and recycled, the more we ensure it keeps retaining carbon dioxide, the main cause of global warming. Far away from landfills or incineration, and from a sad end for everyone. At Sonai Arauco, we have one of the best examples of a circular bioeconomy. We make countless desks disappear in a positive way. It's a virtuous circle in which we destroy or rather repurpose this desk for recycling and reuse, giving it countless lives. With our business model, we transform wood waste into new products, extending the life cycle of this material. And we materialize our vision of creating a better life, a better planet, and a better future through our wood solutions. After all, wood is not infinite. Considering that 1 ton of wood equals 50 of these desks, that might not seem like much, does it? But how many wooden objects are currently at the end of their useful life and are not being reused? Because we transformed this desk, we created this new panel, and this one, and this one. Because we recycled it, this desk is now this wall, this piece of furniture, and an integral part of this building. Next time you look at a wooden product, remember, it's in our hands to give it a second, third, and fourth life. This is how we at Sonai Arauco ensure that the wood continues circulating and exercising its capacity to retain CO2. The future is made this way. with small actions that are good for the planet of today and tomorrow.
Como puderam ver, a circularidade está profundamente enraizada no nosso modelo de negócio, na nossa estratégia, e é um compromisso dentro de toda a empresa e que envolve muitos departamentos, muitas equipas. É também essencial, nós não funcionamos sozinhos na circularidade, estamos dentro de uma cadeia de valor. Precisamos de fornecedores, de clientes que estejam alinhados com a nossa visão, com os nossos princípios e que nos desafiem diariamente. Para falar um pouco também sobre isso, eu vou chamar aqui a Ana Barbosa, Sustainability Manager da IKEA Portugal, que vai falar um pouco sobre esta relação.
Obrigada, Nuno. Boa tarde a todos. É um verdadeiro prazer estar aqui hoje e em honra a esta parceria entre a IKEA Portugal e a Sonai Arauco, de que vos vou falar. Começo com este slide. Mas antes, também como a Sonai Arauco, na IKEA adoramos a madeira. A madeira é uma matéria-prima renovável, reciclável, bonita, duradoura e é um excelente representante da nossa herança de design escandinavo. Em 2023, 59% do volume de matérias-primas utilizados na IKEA globalmente foi madeira e dessa, 17% era reciclada. Temos a ambição de subir, de aumentar esta percentagem de madeira reciclada e por isso estas parcerias fazem todo sentido. Aqui podem ver a cadeia de valor da Sonai Arauco que o Nuno mostrou anteriormente e podem ver onde é que este ciclo de circularidade entra dentro dessa cadeia de valor. Os resíduos de madeira e derivados da IKEA Portugal são encaminhados para um reciclador dentro da cadeia de valor da Sonai Arauco e aí são encaminhados para a Sonai Arauco para fazer painéis, que são, entretanto, vendidos aos seus clientes e entre esses clientes temos a IKEA Industry, no norte de Portugal. A IKEA Industry fornece então, produz então artigos IKEA novos, como mesas LAC ou estantes Calax, que poderão conhecer, que são enviados para as lojas de toda a Europa, nomeadamente para as lojas da IKEA Portugal. E assim se fecha este ciclo de circularidade. Com esta parceria, que começou mais ou menos há um ano atrás, já enviamos 198 toneladas de resíduos de madeira para este ciclo, no que consideramos uma parceria de sucesso. E nesse sentido quero mais uma vez agradecer ao Nuno e partilhar aqui com orgulho este exemplo. Mas queria continuar e dizer que, ou repetir, porque já foi dito aqui, que a circularidade não é apenas trabalhar na hierarquia de resíduos, não é apenas reciclar mais. A circularidade é muito mais complexa e é também, por exemplo, evitar resíduos. E é sobre isso que vos quero falar a seguir. Ao prolongarmos a vida de cada produto, estamos a evitar resíduos e a evitar consumo de novos recursos. Começo por dizer que na IKEA, e igualmente na IKEA Portugal, temos uma estratégia de sustentabilidade que tem uma abordagem ampla, é ajustada ao nosso modelo de negócio e é integrada no nosso plano de negócios. Ela tem 3 áreas de foco, mas eu hoje vou dedicar-me à segunda área de foco: clima, natureza e circularidade. Queremos, com esta área de foco, obviamente crescer o negócio, mas ao mesmo tempo regenerar recursos e também reduzir as emissões de CO2 de toda a nossa cadeia de valor. Alinhados com o Acordo de Paris, temos a ambição de reduzir em 50% as emissões de CO2 em valor absoluto de toda a cadeia de valor da IKEA até 2030. No que diz respeito mais à área de circularidade, que obviamente está muito ligada também com emissões de CO2, como já foi referido também aqui hoje, temos a ambição, até 2030, de que todas as matérias-primas que utilizamos sejam renováveis ou recicladas e, portanto, divergirmos do uso de matérias-primas de origem fóssil. Mas, para além das matérias-primas, do ponto de vista do consumidor e de proximidade ao consumidor, que tipo de iniciativas de circularidade é que temos? E neste caso aqui na IKEA Portugal, eu trago-vos duas. Queria começar por vos falar da área circular. É uma zona comercial que existe em todas as nossas lojas e onde vendemos produtos usados. Estes produtos podem ter origem de produtos de exposição, produtos cuja embalagem foi danificada, produtos com pequenos danos ou produtos devolvidos pelo cliente. Em todo o caso, não estão em condições para serem vendidos como novos, mas estão em condições de qualidade e funcionalidade para serem vendidos nesta área a um preço mais acessível. É uma área onde de triplo benefício, é quase o tal tripé que nós ouvimos hoje da Cláudia. Estes produtos eventualmente seriam resíduos e desta forma não são, a sua vida é prolongada. Ao mesmo tempo, ao vendermos nesta área circular, temos uma nova fonte de receita e, por outro lado, estamos a apresentar uma solução para os clientes que, já procuram a segunda mão em primeiro lugar, ou B, não têm dinheiro para comprar um produto novo e encontram aqui uma solução excelente. Nos últimos 6 anos, já vendemos cerca de 5 milhões de produtos nas áreas circulares das nossas lojas, entre acessórios e mobiliário. Trago-vos também um outro serviço. O nosso serviço de segunda vida é um serviço de compra e venda de produtos IKEA em segunda mão, na verdade. Neste serviço, os clientes IKEA com mobiliário que queiram vender podem optar por vendê-lo à IKEA. Através de uma plataforma muito simples e intuitiva, rapidamente identificam o produto e obtêm uma cotação. E se assim decidirem, trazem o produto à nossa loja e vendem-no a nós. Esse produto é revendido por nós, é comprado a este cliente e revendido por nós a outro cliente na nossa área circular que vos falei agora mesmo. Nos últimos 3 anos, já compramos e vendemos cerca de 36 mil produtos no âmbito deste serviço de segunda vida. E eu digo compramos e vendemos porque estes produtos são muito fáceis de vender na área circular. Por vezes são produtos que já saíram de coleção e os nossos clientes têm muito interesse na compra destes produtos. E como nós vendemos ao mesmo preço que compramos, o valor é também muito interessante. No entanto, queremos crescer. 36 mil produtos é bom, mas nós queremos mais. E o potencial da segunda mão é muito maior. Como eventualmente terão ouvido, na IKEA estamos neste momento a testar uma plataforma de compra e venda de produtos IKEA em segunda mão, peer-to-peer, a IKEA Pre-Owned, que está a ser testada em Espanha, está a ser testada também na Noruega e que nós queremos trazer para Portugal ainda em 2026. E acreditamos que aqui sim vamos a maximizar e trazer muito potencial para estas vendas em segunda mão. Não queria deixar de terminar sem referir o nosso trabalho na redução de pegada carbónica. A circularidade e as emissões carbónicas andam de mão dada. Com as iniciativas de que vos falei, de reciclagem de resíduos, eliminação de aterro, redução de resíduos, mas também com iniciativas de transição energética, já reduzimos as emissões de operação dos nossos edifícios na IKEA Portugal em 85%, desde o ano 2016, que é o nosso ano base. Do ponto de vista de IKEA global, eu falei-vos do objetivo de 50%, a pegada em valor absoluto da IKEA, e aqui já falamos Scope 1, 2 e 3, já reduziu em mais de 20% desde o mesmo ano base. E eu acredito, e na IKEA acreditamos, que a nossa abordagem à sustentabilidade, em que trabalhamos com as comunidades, com igualdade, diversidade e inclusão junto dos nossos colaboradores, em que trazemos produtos e soluções para uma vida mais sustentável em casa e em que reduzimos emissões de CO2 e mostramos que é possível esta desassociação do crescimento do negócio, de um crescimento também de emissões de CO2, é um contributo real, concreto e poderoso para a nossa visão de criar um melhor dia-a-dia para a maioria das pessoas. Muito obrigada. Boa tarde.
Queria agradecer à Ana e ao Nuno por nos mostrarem como os desafios podem ser superados através da inovação e do compromisso com a sustentabilidade, como os podemos aqui tão bem ouvir. O vosso trabalho, Ana e Nuno, é uma inspiração e um exemplo claro de como se podem transformar resíduos em valor e ao mesmo tempo criar um impacto positivo para todos nós. So, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, a true pioneer in sustainability and a global authority on circular economy principles. An entrepreneur, economist, and a visionary, he is best known for his groundbreaking work in regenerative approaches and for introducing the concept of the blue economy. His innovative perspective transforms environmental challenges into opportunities, inspiring business and leaders worldwide to embrace sustainable and restorative practices. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Gunter Pauly. Professor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Boa tarde, como vai? Tudo bom? Vou fazer a palestra no inglês. I'm going to switch to English. But if you want to ask me questions in Portuguese, there's no problem whatsoever. You know, I've been called the Steve Jobs of sustainability. But I just arrived from Cuba. You know what happened? They called me the Che Guevara of sustainability. I didn't bring guns. I didn't have any weapons with me, but that's what happened. About 20 years ago, I wrote a book about how can we think out of the box. I have set up more than 204 companies in my 44 years of entrepreneur, and all of them are ecological, natural products. So I want to give you my key principles on how can you not just be an entrepreneur, but how can you be a serial entrepreneur? Wouldn't you like that? I mean, I don't want to do it only once if you succeed the first one. Would you stick to just first one? No. And so the first thing is, let's remember the beauty in life before you dive into too much of the business world. Here we go. If you don't put it in your mind that she's beautiful, you're never going to be a great entrepreneur in circularity. But you have to stay positive. The biggest challenge we have is they're bombarding us with this kind of news. And as long as they're so negative all the time, you need to have the character to see the good in the bad. I wrote this book 30 years ago, Steering Business Towards Sustainability, when I was in charge of preparing COP3. We're COP29. We're nowhere. We need the entrepreneurs to make the difference. And what we need to make certain when we know that we have the entrepreneurs to make the difference, then the second thing we need is we have to choose a good group of mentors. Don't go into business without mentors. And guess what? Our mentors are unique people, but you have to go and chase them. I was chased by Belmiro de Acevedo in '87 because I was the the Secretary General of the European Business Press Federation, and he wanted to go public. I never had so much good wines of Portugal. I didn't know the wines were so great in '87, now I remember. But what we need is mentors. And as an entrepreneur, you have to have mentors who help you see the portfolio of opportunities. You can't just have one business model to focus on like they teach the MBAs. You have to have a portfolio of opportunities to choose from. And that's my specialty. I wrote the portfolio for Argentina. I wrote the portfolio for Rio de Janeiro, for Morocco. I have 23 countries today who have written a strategy that is not analyzing, because too much analysis leads to paralysis. We need action on the ground. We need to accelerate. And therefore, my focus is explore the obvious. Let me give you an example from Rio de Janeiro. I'm being told there's no more fish in Rio de Janeiro. Okay. Professor Pauli, what can we do to get the fish back? Wow, let's go and see the fishermen. And let's go and check them, and let's ask some questions. Now I'm going to ask you the question as I asked the fishermen. Now you're a fishing nation, right? Portugal? The fish you see there, is that a male or a female fish? Who gives me the answer? You see, you have an audience here of 400 people who don't even know the difference between a male and a female. And let me submit to you, if you don't know the difference between a male and a female, what do you know? This is the obvious. So we have designed fishing systems whereby we only catch the males. Why not the female? Because they're laying eggs, my God. I mean, if you kill the lady with the eggs, how do you want to have fish in the future? We are not overfishing, we're fishing too many pregnant females. That's how we work on opportunities. And when we look at it, we ask questions no one can answer. Not even ChatGPT can answer. Let me ask you a very simple question. How does the apple get up in a tree? Do you know? Do you know the 7 laws of physics that allow an apple to go against the law of gravity? If you want really innovative ideas on renewable energies, let's see how the apple did it. Because the apple has been going up on the tree for millions of years, never had any difficulties. No CO2 emissions is a problem. How come we teach the kids how the apple comes down and no one teaches the kids how the apple got up in the first place? These are the questions we need to ask. That's when you're going to see opportunities that are obvious. And you have to take time to be inspired. I am very much inspired by nature. If I am face to face with questions on sustainability of anything, then I take a step back and I look for my hero in nature. And guess what? Everything that is still around in nature survived millions of years because all the others became fossils. So as a result, we got some good examples. Who saw the octopus, my teacher? Are you still eating octopus? No! It's impossible to eat an octopus after you've seen that movie. Not because I'm against eating meat, I just think this is such a smart animal. This is an octopus in disguise because there's a shark that came by, and with his 8 arms he immediately puts all the shells around him so that the shark will just sail by. This gives us great ideas of what we can see in the sea. I want to be in new businesses where no one is there. I mean, I leave the recycling to IKEA for your wood. I'll leave it to you. I'm not going to go there. I trust you do a much better job than me. But when it comes to bamboo, I am your teacher. And you're still not doing anything in bamboo, although bamboo grows to 25 meters in 2 years. Why is there no IKEA with bamboo? And so since no one is doing it, I'm doing it. So I created this book, Grow Your Own House, not Build Your Own House. We've done 200,000 copies with Vitra Design, and this is the building I constructed, which is the first building made with bamboo, 4,000 poles of bamboo put together with a German building permit. You know what it is? Anyone here is an engineer, construction engineer? You want a German building permit? Don't think that you can talk them through it. In 9 months, we got for that building a German building permit because we had the signs. When you have signs, you can convince engineers. But all too often, we forget that 1 billion people in the world live in a bamboo house, and they think it's a proof of their poverty. So we set out to design a $20,000 grow your own house, 2 stories high, and a balcony. You need to have things done in a way that you can be the first. And when you're the first, then you will set the rules of the game. I always intend to integrate design. I mean, I'm a professor of eco-design at the Politecnico di Torino in Italy. And of course, I asked my students, design me music with coffee, and I got this. And then I said, give me the most sustainable cup of coffee that you have ever had in your life. And then I got that. Sugar included. Sorry, if you don't want sugar, it will drip. But I think it's very important that we need to do the designs, and sometimes we test it like no one does it. You know why the zebra has black and white stripes? Because the black gets hot, the air gets warm, rises, means low pressure. The white gets warm, the air doesn't rise. So we have 2 opposite movements. The black absorbs heat, and the cold reflects the heat. And when you have low pressure and high pressure, you have wind. This is the ventilator. Now, why does he want a ventilator? Did you know that the zebra is the only animal in Africa that does not have malaria? No mosquitoes can land on the zebra because there's always wind. Wow! When I hear that, I want to test it out. I have 6 children. And if you want to test things with children, you better do it with art. Paint their hands. Hold it still, no mosquito will bite you. As an entrepreneur, you set the most impossible targets. When I read in 1986 the first IPCC report, I realized it was going to be climate change. So I said, the goal, 0 emissions. Then Toyota said, you registered that. We want to use it. I said, because you're not really zero emissions, you're just doing greenwashing. He said, no, we'll do better in the future. I don't accept your better in the future. So when they came out with the Prius, they came back to me and said, would you be willing to release? I said, yes, on one condition. You make a 2-year global campaign, zero emissions. And they did. We need sometimes to take the steps forward because we have enough science to prove that it works. Science is our basis, not slogans. And everything in nature always is zero emissions, because whatever is an emission for one is a resource for the other. And then I do something in my businesses which sometimes surprises. I make allies that are not the obvious ones to work with. So let me give you an example again from nature. When deer wake up in the morning, they want to have juicy grass to eat. So they go to the riverside. When the deer eat every morning along the riverside, you have rocks along the river. And when you have rocks along the river, then you have too much erosion, then the water is too much turbidity, then you don't have fish and you can't have anymore your la trucha. You can't anymore have your fishes to fish. So if you want fishes to come back to the rivers, who do you need? Yeah, the wolf. Because when the wolf is there, then all of a sudden no deer goes to the side of the river anymore. They don't need to have a law. They need to have tax incentives. They don't need subsidies. They just figure out how behavior changes. And what we need to learn, and as entrepreneur, I found new ways of getting people to work together, actually not working together, but respecting that your presence means that I cannot go and eat fresh, juicy grass along the river in the morning, because otherwise you will eat me. Wow, it works. So here is my most important first big success that I had in business. Maybe some of you still know this company. Who knows this company, Ecover? That's me. What did we do? We did free marketing. How? Because I decided that I was building the first zero emissions factory in the world, a factory made out of wood. I didn't know bamboo yet. Today it will be out of bamboo. A grass roof, and I realized that I have to deliver detergents. And as a detergent company, I'm transporting water. So as a result, my complete fleet of cars was running on biodiesel. We had even 2 cars on biogas. Hey, biogas. 1992. You were already born? You know, the beauty is that we were able to do it, but then they refused me. They refused to give me a license to operate the factory. You know why? Because I was not connected to the sewage system. But I had no sewage. I was zero emissions. So they said, no. Of course, it's a tax issue. You're connected, you pay tax. I said, no, I'm not connected. So they said, you have to be connected. I'm not going to be connected. Come and see my beautiful natural system of taking care of my wastewater, and I pump the wastewater on the roof, so the water on the roof in the summer evaporates and keeps the inside cool. In the wintertime, it freezes, so I have an igloo effect. Give me my permit. Didn't give me the permit, so what do? I opened the factory without a permit, sorry. And of course then, there is a debate, a discussion. This is what we need. Sometimes you have to go boom. Not with boom, boom. You just go boom. And what we need to do is more often not to be nice to each other. Sometimes you have to say it. It doesn't make sense. And of course, oh yeah, you saw the factory here. There's no one on strike, huh? It's not Sunday, it's a weekday. And why is there no car? Because I paid my workers to ride the bicycle to work. I paid them €0.50. What happens in Belgium when you pay €0.50 to everyone in the factory to come on a bicycle to work? They come on a bicycle. And what is my advantage? Their health. If my workers are riding the bike 2 times a week, 2 times a day, then they're going to be in good health. So I needed to put a big parking for all the bicycles. Ladies and gentlemen, I launched Ecover and I used palm oil. I didn't know it was so bad. But then you need something else in your business, which is what I call ethics at the core. I mean, when I came to Indonesia and I saw this and this, I realized that I just could not do less bad. I had to find something new. Now! You can't say, I will phase it out in 2050 with net zero. Sorry, guys. I don't believe in that. I don't push it 26 years ahead. I got to do it now. If you're an entrepreneur, you never think 2050. You do now, because you have no patience, and your banks and your financiers, they want to get out as well in 3 years. So as a result, I start to investigate, as was suggested before, under the full supply chain. And what did I find? Oh, I was in Brazil. And the Brazilians were the champions of the juice. And when you make juice, you have the skin of the citrus fruits. And I asked the question, what do you do with the skin? And they said, we compost. And I said, would you be happy to make more money than compost? Compost is great, clap, 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 but it doesn't make money. Don't we need business models where we make money so that we can drive the projects forward? Now, citrus fruits have a chemical called D-limonene, D-limonene. And the D-limonene today, we have 8 factories in Brazil. All the juice, not the drop of the juice gets frozen and exported by tankers to the rest of the world. But the skins we process in Brazil, in the factories, to make the most biodegradable detergent. It took me 1 year to get the first factory operational. 1 year only. Why? Because I was killing orangutans in Indonesia. You have to go for the change. So my suggestion is that you go really for a serial entrepreneurship. And I'm going to give you one example of how I went into 9 businesses, one after the other, starting with the discovery in Tasmania of this red seaweed. I'm a diver. I dive. I go scuba diving. As a diver, you touch this red seaweed and it feels very hard. That means there is no biofilm. When we don't like bacteria, we spray chemicals, right? We want to kill them. We forget that there are more of them than us, so it doesn't work very well. We always get them mutated. The seaweed knew that as well. So the seaweed developed a special tiny chemical called the pheromone, and that chemical blocks the hearing of the bacteria. Well, you probably didn't even know the bacteria were talking to each other. So the bacteria talk to each other with quorum sensing. We block the hearing, and that permits us to have actually a disruption of the biofilm. Today, it's a new standard for the food industry. I got the idea from a seaweed. But when I got into the seaweeds and I knew how to plant it, I was in Africa, in Zanzibar, and I realized that there was a lot of dynamite fishing. And if people are doing dynamite fishing, that means they are desperate. They're hungry. So we started in Tanzania, in Zanzibar, the seaweed farming. We have 23,000 women working there. 23,000. It's not just, I mean, how many people is IKEA employing in Portugal? 3,000. Wow, I'm good. I was the right moment, the right question. But then I go to Indonesia, and in Indonesia wanted to become the leader in seaweed farming. And in Indonesia today, we have already 4 factories extracting the biochemicals. And so when you have the seaweed farming and you have the extraction of the chemicals, then you realize the ecosystem needs mangroves. And so we're doing the mangroves, but in the mangroves, you have crabs. And we decided after the infamous tsunami that we needed to plant much more mangroves, but we planted them in this technique with channels in the middle and a metal mesh. You know why? Because little shrimps, when they're larvae, they like to eat the microalgae. They get very fat and can't get out anymore. We have the greatest shrimp farms in Indonesia where we don't feed the shrimp. Let me tell you, if you don't have to feed a shrimp, your margins are good. How do we do it? By planting mangroves, by sequestering carbon. We're defining the rules. And this is what we need to think of. But then I realized that all these salmon factories are just guzzling protein from fishes. The sardines are being eaten by salmons in order to get omega-3. Can you imagine it? Why don't you eat sardines instead? You may have very good ones here. So I decided to start another business in '86, first in Africa, then in South Africa, now in Argentina. We farm fly larvae. Yeah, you don't like the idea. I see many people's face going like, no, that's not my business. Well, let me talk to your finance person and your investors, and they will tell you this is great business. Because a larvae is able to make 1 kilogram of fly eggs in 4 or 5 days turn into 375 kilograms of pure protein. Who beats me? No one. Europe has forbidden it till 2022. Today there's over $1.5 billion of investments. What are we doing? We're fighting overfishing. And what do we need? Offal, waste from slaughterhouses. That today Europe obliges you to burn at 200 euros a ton. We take it and we sell it for 2,000 euro a ton. Do we understand each other? Do you need a business consultant to explain the details? This is how we operate. We operate focused on getting direct results, and this will actually help us solve the food. I'm coming to my last cases. We need to change the rules of the game, I said. And let me show you how I'm trying to do it in shipping. This is my boat. It's my boat. It's not a boat from someone there. This is the first boat that went around the world only with solar energy, but it took 2 years. I mean, who has 2 years? So we decided to add a lot of new technologies. And to conclude, I'll show you some of the video. Porima means the goddess of the future. This is a sky sail. It's a robot that will make a sail fly in an infinity, and it will pull the boat at 10 knots. 560 square meters of solar panels allow us to have all the energy, but since the kite is pulling, we convert seawater into hydrogen. We've been doing that since 2017. Don't tell me that there's a great future in hydrogen. I know it is. The kite finds the power of the wind at 200 meters altitude. We have sensors that will figure out where is the best wind. And then the kite goes over there. This is what's called today artificial intelligence. But we're using it, putting it in practice. Today we're building 100 chips between now and 2030. Guess what? I couldn't get financing in Europe. It's $1 billion for something that is considered not proven. So I get it in China. You know, capitals are global. Europe needs to be a bit more innovative. And the only way we're going to get more innovative is if they have more entrepreneurs. But we will not get innovative very often because we don't have the data. Europe has submitted itself to the structure of data mining. 99% of the data is controlled by 10 companies. I want to focus on the data that no one is looking at. There is no data on the sea, only 0.1%. One of our big new business initiatives today is data from the sea. And I call that data farming. I'm farming my data. You know the concept of eDNA, catching all the DNA that's in the sea. We're having automated it. We're doing it on every ship. Every ship will be finding new life every day. We're doing the sequencing of the DNA on our ship. Why do you put it into a little tube, freeze it, send it to a laboratory and get results 3 months later? That's how Europe does it. I'm impatient. I'm an entrepreneur. Here we go. We need to have new initiatives. And I will not go into the details of this because I realized that I got a bit carried away and talked too long, as it sometimes happens. But we have decided that this language that the divers need to learn is a bit out of date. So here are the new masks that we have designed that allow us to talk to each other while we're in the water. I mean, you heard me, right? You go into the water, you have your mask on, and you talk to each other. Isn't that nice? I mean, how many people wouldn't like to say, oh, look at that great shark on the left? We need to change our technologies, and there's no communications in the water. So I decided to bring together 6 companies that are focusing on communication techniques in the water without a cable. Have you heard lately that they tend to cut cables that are laid into the oceans? Mine you can't cut because it's light. So we are very focused on getting technologies going so that we have a complete new business to set up. And this is what I learned from Belmiro Acevedo. He was always starting new things, all the time, because he saw the opportunities, he saw the little hole in the market. Final words. Never, as an entrepreneur, lose a chance to inspire a future client. Anyone who came to my factory at Ecover and planted the flower on the roof 32 years later is still a customer. You know what it is, repeat business? Repeat business, someone who keeps on coming back because they planted a flower on your roof, and that was our mark. So I write stories for children. I wrote already 365 stories. Stories that allow me to prepare the mindset of the children to see this great future, because since they decided 2050, if I talk to the kids now, they're already in their 20s, they've graduated. They better have the right ideas. That is better than greenwashing. Today, I have one country that has adopted all my fables. Guess which one it is? China. Can you imagine a Belgian is approved by the Communist Party? I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a libertarian, I don't want to know about rules of the government, I want to be free to compete on the market, set my own rules. And the Chinese say, oh, your stories are very good, why don't you come and share them with us? I'm in 795,000 schools, ladies and gentlemen. If we don't take time to inspire our next generation, ladies and gentlemen, we will not have an entrepreneurial generation. It's up to us. It's not only talking to the convinced, it's talking to the ones that want to be inspired, because there's so much bad news around. Thank you. Thank you.
Foi aqui momento impactante que tivemos. Thank you so much, Professor Gunter Pauli, for your thought-provoking and inspiring ideas. Your perspective on redefining competitive rules through innovative business models remind us of the immense potential we have to create sustainable and regenerative futures. It was an honor to hear from you. Muito obrigada e, sobretudo, não só pelas palavras, mas também penso que pelas imagens impactantes. Costumamos dizer coração que não vê, coração que não sente, e tenho a certeza que aqui nesta sala todos os nossos corações pulsaram. Ao encerrar, é verdade, estamos quase a encerrar este dia extraordinário, esta sessão final, que reflete a essência do Innovators Forum, a jornada rumo a um futuro verdadeiramente circular. O nosso último orador é alguém a cuja visão e a liderança têm sido fundamentais na concretização de iniciativas realmente transformadoras. Como chairman da SONAI e da Fundação Belmiro de Azevedo, tem defendido incansavelmente a integração da sustentabilidade nas estratégias empresariais, inspirando as organizações a colocarem a inovação e o impacto como os pilares centrais do seu crescimento. Peço-vos agora uma salva de palmas para Paulo Azevedo. Paulo, bem-vindo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this loud enough? They asked me to speak as loudly as I could. Well, basically my job here is to thank everyone. And I'd like to start by thanking the team that organized this, the whole team, but particularly Sonia and Danielle. I don't see Danielle. But also all the speakers, all the moderators, our marvelous hostess, Katerina, all the partners that are here with their presenting their services and their products. And it's wonderful that you're all interested and that you spent your afternoon here discussing circular economy, which is a really, really important subject. Sonia also asked me to try and help with the goals of, announced by Claudia, namely to inspire everyone to do more, to innovate more, and to find out more circular solutions. And it's difficult because I think all the speakers today did a really good job and touched upon everything. My goal was basically to convince you of four things. One is that moving to a circular economy is not optional. Circularity is critical to sustainability, so that we don't have the option. We have to do it. The second thing, it is a very large and difficult task for everyone, for governments, for legislators, for regulators, for regional and global authorities, for entrepreneurs, companies, and individuals, for everyone. As it was said today, we are the economy. The third thing is that I really believe and know that we will pull through all the difficult sustainability targets that we have. I mean, as a species. We've done it before in the past, and we will do it, and we will do it again. The real question is, can we do it in a smart way, with as little human suffering and the little suffering of nature as possible. And the fourth thing, like with all profound changes of societies, this will bring about a huge number of opportunities, short-term, medium-term, and long-term opportunities. And a lot of us work in companies, and if we work in companies, this is something you should be happy about. Okay, this is where value gets generated, when innovation really pays off. But these four things, I think this case was made very competently, each one of them, throughout all the presentations. So it's difficult, but I'll have a go anyway. And I'll have a go in a perspective which is slightly different. I have a different hat, other than the chair of SONAI. By the way, I'm not chair of the Belmiro de Azevedo Foundation. I'm CEO. My mother is a chairwoman, very important chairwoman. Yeah, so I help the University of Porto, namely the Faculty of Economics, the Faculty of Science, and one of its research institutes, which is Biopolis CBU, a research institute on biodiversity. I help them set up a research and dialogue center looking at long-term sustainable scenarios where the socioeconomic systems are compatible with the Earth system. Very forward-looking, very transdisciplinary. And to do that, we look at the evolutionary perspective of this problem. We look at it in the scale of the history of our species. And you may well ask, why do we do that? Well, the reason is because it gives us a good perspective on the magnitude of the challenge ahead of us, because it brings us confidence that we have done more difficult things in the past, and we hope that we can learn from the past solutions that will help us build the future. And so I've sort of packed together a lot into a slide here that I wanted to show you. And really, in biological terms, the success of a species is very much measured by the ability to expand the ecological niche of that species. That is, the habitat in which we can live and prosper. And all species try to do that, and we were amazing at doing that. We went global, and there's almost 8 billion of us. So from a biological perspective, that's success. It brings a lot of problems, but it's success. And there are two key successful indicators that have allowed this to go on for a long time. One is that we've always found solutions to cooperate in ever larger groups and expand our collective ability to do things. What we can do as individuals is minuscule compared to what we can do as a species. And the second key success factor has some unfortunate consequences, is we were always able to somehow find ways to extract per capita more energy, use a greater part of our planet, and extract more raw materials. Now, this has happened, but during that time, I have 2 arrows there. One is the level of organization, the band, tribe, chiefdom, state, and then above state. And below that is what's usually called the mode of living. And it's called the mode of living because in each one of these stages, what we did, I mean, almost everyone did, had to change significantly. We're all hunter-gatherers. We became practically all farmers. Then we became practically industrial workers. So actually, it means changing everything. You change what every single person does, what their life is like. And you change, on the level above, you change the scale of your organization. So we've always had big challenges, and we've always had to change everything to make them pay off. And unfortunately, because it's difficult, this is the scale of the challenge that we have in front of us. And there's an additional problem, is that these 3 arrows, which I sometimes call arrows of time. They're not true arrows of time. Of course, the only true arrow of time is entropy, the only thing that never goes backwards. But these, when you look at this scale, all these three kept growing: energy, land use, and raw material extraction. And we've spoken a lot about today how this has led to breaking safe operating spaces, number of planetary boundaries. And so it's game over. We can't play the same game. We have to change even the way that we win. And circularity is really, really key to this. First, because of the raw material limitations. And I like this graph. This is a European graph, because I like to think if we only recycle 7%, what happens to everything else? Where does it go? And here you can see that it basically goes to two places: to pollution, air pollution, or landfills, or the ocean. Those are the bits that are not exported. And the rest goes to societal stocks. But everything, all the stuff that we have, all this around us, buildings, roads, cars, all the stuff that we own, it's just stuff that we build. It's not living stuff. We just extract and have more and more and more stuff. Most people know the problems of emissions, the tons of plastics in the sea, the air pollution, the water pollution, the microplastics, the use of land with landfills. But sometimes, less often, it's known that these societal stocks, which is also called the technosphere, what the scale it has accelerated to in the last 50 years. And today, our stuff weighs more than the entire biomass on our planet, the biosphere, the place where life exists that we know of. There's more stuff that we make than biomass in the biosphere. So, sometimes it's difficult to know for sure if some of these very complicated models that plan out the boundaries are really true. It's easy for skeptics to say, well, they calculated it 2 years ago, it was different. But there's some really, really obvious things that, no one can deny. It's like, you know that 96% of the weight of mammals on this planet are either humans or the livestock, food for us. The rest of all wild mammals on the planet are less than 4%. How far can it go? There are some really, really hard limitations. And to make matters more central for the circular economy, going back to this slide, what we do with raw materials and our current model is also creating huge problems that are compiling with the problems of energy use and land use. So making a lot of the materials we use, concrete, steel, aluminium, glass, it's all very energy intensive. And of course, if we recycle, it's much, much less energy intensive. And energy also requires more space. We have to fill up valleys with dams. We need space for solar panels. We need space for nothing can be done without space. And land use is a limitation. Farming and cropland has pushed us to an extreme where wilderness is also pushed to a corner of the earth, a third of the earth, and a lot of it in not so productive areas for biodiversity. And all this, so the problem with extracting and using raw materials and not recycling them is not just contributing to the raw material problems, it's contributing to the energy and to the land use problems. So we really, really have to solve it. And it is a really, really big effort. And this is a very complicated chart, but not necessary to be complicated. It's just, my goal here is just to explain we understand a lot of the current problems. We are looking at a lot of attempts, and there's lots of opportunities, and there's lots of things that need to be done in solving, adapting, mitigating the problems that we are currently creating. But we also know that this is a transformational problem for society, and we have to understand how we're going to solve the problem in the long run. What are the factors that we can play with to come up with a new organization for society, for economic systems? And so we work a lot on that as well. But in that section, the only thing I want to bring forth to you, because it's a source of a lot of hope for me, is that we look at evolutionary psychology to understand how human populations manage to get all these cultural traits that enable them to solve all these problems. And the really good thing is the cultural traits that our species has an ultra-social species, are just the traits that we need to solve the problem. You can easily argue that maybe we don't quite yet have enough of these cultural traits to act decisively and with intent at a global scale, but we do have them, so we just have to improve on them. This picture is called the pale blue dot, and it was quite influential. The first time we saw our planet from a very, very, very long distance, as the Voyager flew out of the Milky Way and took a photograph back with us and the center of the Milky Way. And it just sort of makes us realize, you know, there may be life somewhere, but there's a hell of a lot of empty space around us. We don't have a lot of choices than fixing this problem. And to make it worse, this is a picture of the atmosphere. This is the only place where we can live. It's a few kilometers thick. If you think of that, it's proportionally is thinner than an apple skin. If you imagine the world was the size of an apple, so we live in this immense, open, empty place on the skin of an apple, and we're ruining it. So it has to be fixed. It's quite a finite space. It's our job to do that, and there's nowhere else we can go. And just to finish up, I think we can't. There's not much we can do about a physical law that is amongst the most solid of all physical laws that we know, and that nothing is lost and nothing is created. It's all transformed. So I think our plea is got to be, let's stop transforming it into pollutants and into waste, and transform it into useful stuff. Let's use less. Yes, I know we're a retailer, and I do realize that I'm saying buy less. That's all right. We want to win in a sustainable world. We don't want to win in an unsustainable world. So yes, buy less, use less, preferably buy even less from our competitors, but buy less. Reuse and recycle. I think one of the things I really I heard clearly today is you have to have a priority. Recycling is not the first goal. It should be the last goal. Unfortunately, even the last goal we're not so good at, but we have to work before the recycling. And yes, let's be part of this journey. Let's lead the way to the circular economy, and let's do it with the optimism that it is possible, but also the knowledge that it's hard, it's a tough challenge that will need our ability to innovate, to create, to find new solutions, and just push ahead. Thank you very much for you all being here and your time dedication to this subject.
Queria agradecer ao Paulo, muito obrigada pelas palavras, por esta partilha que nos toca, por percebermos que o tempo é o agora, por percebermos que, de facto, realmente devemos ser realistas, sim, mas realistas otimistas. E eu penso que todos os que estamos aqui o somos. De outra forma, não haveria aqui esta união, nem este pulsar que se sentiu nesta sala ao longo desta tarde. Queria agradecer ainda as palavras, porque estas palavras que ouvimos reforçam a importância do esforço coletivo para construirmos um futuro mais sustentável, que é o que todos devemos ambicionar, no fundo. O Innovators Forum mostrou-nos hoje que a circularidade não é apenas uma visão distante, mas sim uma realidade que está ao alcance de todos nós. Agora, cabe-nos a nós transformar essas ideias e aquilo que ouvimos em ações concretas, muitas delas já tomadas, dentro das nossas empresas, nas nossas comunidades, nas nossas vidas diárias. Foi um privilégio da minha parte poder partilhar este dia convosco e com oradores tão especiais e com participantes tão empenhados e tão atentos como vocês. Eu estou certa que, com a determinação, com a colaboração certa, vamos continuar a inspirar, vamos poder inovar e vamos, sobretudo, impactar. Esta é uma excelente oportunidade para explorar ideias e potenciais colaborações e, por isso, antes de terminarmos, eu quero convidar-vos, já estão a perceber que está a haver aqui movimentações, convidar-vos ao nosso cocktail, onde poderão descontrair, onde poderão trocar contactos, trocar impressões e visitarem com mais calma, agora sim, os nossos stands físicos e virtuais dos nossos parceiros que representam as várias áreas de mercado, mas todos eles com um objetivo comum: fazer parte de um futuro circular. Muito obrigada mais uma vez a todos os presentes, bem como aos que assistem e assistiram virtualmente a este Innovators Forum Circularity powered by Sonai. Da minha parte foi uma honra. Até breve. Boa tarde.